Wake up! 765! The Matrix cracks! 4, 3, 2, resistance ignites! 1, live! Shadows in DC, technocracy's control. AI spies, CBDCs lock your soul. Dark enlightenment feels twisted play. Psychosis, AI, energy fade away. Roundtable life, expose the fight. Courtenay hosts under neon light. Patrick, Aaron, Craig, truth ignites. Stop technocracy, no CBDC, freedom fights. Join now on YouTube at Courts, Truth, and X. Resist. The resistance begins. Live, let's roar.
Hello, we're live. Welcome to the first ever Technocracy Roundtable. I think this is going to be an incredibly epic, very special event. We are hoping, if there is interest, that we're going to make this a regular thing. So a little bit of housekeeping. I just want to let all of you know, I see there's lots of people very active in the chat from all over the world. Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. If you have questions, we will be doing Q&A. We will likely do that at the end, where this is going to be a conversational format, so I don't want to interrupt the flow. But if you could put Q: in your comment, we will know that that is a question, and then we'll be able to search for it. So if you have questions that come up as we're chatting and having the discussion, put that in before your question so that we know to search for that. So there's that. And yeah, please share this if you have friends and people who you think would be interested in this. Please hit the like button, because that helps get through some of the algorithms that are not always so friendly to these kind of topics. And also share it, spread the word with all of your friends, loved ones. This is, I think, probably one of the most important topics of today. I know a lot of people talk about various elements of tyranny that unfortunately most of us around the world have experienced or studied. When it comes to technocracy, I think it is a tyranny that is really just unfathomable. Most people can't really even begin to conceive what that could be like to be inside that kind of a technocratic control grid. So we're going to talk about some of those ideas today, and hopefully we're going to come up with some defenses against technocracy. That is what we're going to brainstorm on, and we welcome suggestions, questions, all of that. So without further ado, let's introduce the panelists. We will start with Patrick Wood, who I don't think needs any introduction. He is the OG technocrat, expert who has been warning us for decades and has been educating all of us. So Patrick Wood, give us a little introduction, and then we'll go around to everyone.
Sounds good. I'm so glad that we're having this this roundtable. This has been waiting to happen, I think, for a long time. People around the country are scratching their heads right now. What is going on? Nothing makes sense. We're going to try to make sense to that tonight for sure. But I just have to joke a little bit. The introduction slide of our podcast today, it depicts the round table, right? We're the knights of the round table. This is kind of appropriate in a way. Okay, it's kind of silly, but you know, who's going to stand up for America at this point? If somebody, if it's not us, I mean, anybody else could have done this, but we're doing it at this point. So let the discussion begin on technocracy. We need to unpack so many things, and I don't have all the answers. Honestly, I don't. But there's so many things in the wind right now. A new financial system is on the horizon. Perhaps the death of a dollar at some point in the future. Maybe we're looking at something like a flip flop from a debt-based system over to an asset-based system. And what does this mean for Americans? Well, there's going to be some radical changes in the future. And hopefully we're going to have some answers for people and for ourselves as well. So I say, let the discussion begin.
Absolutely. Yeah, Aaron, give us a little introduction.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm very excited to be here and very honored to be on with this incredible panel. Once I learned about technocracy, and it's only really been about 3 years, I realized that it's the biggest single threat really to free will. And I learned about technocracy from Patrick. So it is truly wonderful to be on. I will say that this is truly the battle of our lifetime, and most people are fundamentally unaware of it. Most people don't know what technocracy is. A lot of people confuse technocracy with technology. And what's gone on since the election has been, in my opinion, a hyper acceleration of technocracy. I think it's advanced 5 years in the last 6 or 7 months. And so from my perspective, the most important thing that we can do is warn people about it. And so that's what I've been doing nonstop for the past 3 years, and will continue to do so.
Thank you. And Craig Winkowitz.
Yeah. Also honored as well. I saw Courtenay doing a show with Harrison Smith on InfoWars at one point, and she was talking about natural asset corporations, and that was really, I've been watching this for a long time. So I come from a market background, and so I've watched, I focus on currency markets, debt markets, stock market, energy markets, commodity markets, and so I've been doing that for 30 plus years. And when I watched what went down with the natural asset corporations, that whole situation, it's like that was our own New York Stock Exchange. That was our own Securities Exchange Commission. That was our own institutions that were, working hand in hand with the technocracy. And that was, I was concerned before that, but that really set me off. And that's why I reached out to Courtenay, and then we developed a relationship, and then, Aaron and so forth. And Aaron, Aaron's focused around the crypto, the digital space, and now the technocracy. And so I've been watching things unfold over the last 30 plus years in the financial markets. And so, that's kind of my angle on things. And hopefully I can interject some things this evening in terms of, again, currency, debt, energy, and, stocks. Again, assets, right? We can get into all these different things: private equity, private credit, public debt. All these different things. There's so many different ways looking at this. And I think there's a big transfer about to take place here. I felt this feeling in 2019 before the repo crisis, and that's what they used to set the stage for COVID. It was this inversion of the yield curve, and they had to come in. The Treasury had to come in. The Federal Reserve had to come in. I'm just feeling like we're in that same kind of a spot, like something's about to hit. So hopefully we can touch on that a little bit. But if not, there's plenty of opportunities to do that in future shows as well. So that's my background.
Great.
Awesome. I think we should start with, I'm guessing that most of the audience is familiar, but for those who aren't, let's do a little bit of an introduction to what is technocracy. I'm always surprised at how few people are familiar with the term and even know what it means. As Aaron said, a lot of people confuse it with technology. I've gotten a lot of pushback recently with some of my writing telling me that I'm opposed to technology, and why would I be opposed to something that could help humanity? Just to clarify, I am not at all opposed to technology. I'm obviously using it to talk to these incredible, brilliant minds and collaborate. So that is quite a gift. So I'm not opposed to technology. I'm opposed to technocracy, which I do think is really putting the free will of humanity, as Aaron said, in jeopardy. And I believe that without the free will, humans cease to be. We cease to exist as humans. And they keep talking about humanity 2.0. I think they mean it. They want a new version of humanity. And I'd like to preserve humanity 1.0. I know we're flawed with all of our foibles, but I'm in favor of keeping that one intact. So let's start with, what is technocracy? Who wants to jump in on that?
I'll jump in.
Yeah.
This is the official definition from technocracy in the 1930s, and it's still relevant today. You'll see when I just tell you what it says. This is a direct quote from the magazine called The Technocrat in 1937. Technocracy is the science of social engineering. That's first off. Are we being socially engineered these days? Holy mackerel, we're all over the place. But I continue. The scientific operation of this entire social mechanism to produce and distribute goods and services to the entire population. For the first time in the human history, it'll be done as a scientific, technical, engineering problem. Then it goes on. It says, there will be no place for politics, politicians, finance, or financiers. That also includes rackets or racketeers. Technocracy will distribute by means of a certificate of distribution available to every citizen from birth to death. Well, when you unpack that just a little bit, you'll see this is a total flip-flop away from capitalism and free market economics. And when technocracy was first created at Columbia University, no less, by scientists and engineers, they reasoned that we did not need private property at all. They would abscond with all private property and put it into a global common trust for them to use to make goods and services for us to consume. They will decide, they said at the time, they will be the one who decides how much, what your share of the continental wealth would be. I guarantee you wouldn't like it either. You would not be happy about it. So this was a crazy idea that was made by officials, scientists, engineers, top people in that day at Columbia University. Well, whatever came out of Columbia that we liked in the first place, but that's another issue. This was the seat of progressivism at the time. And this system persisted actively for at least 15 or 20 years. The American public saw through it at some point, and they rejected the whole thing out of hand. They saw where it was headed. It would have been the collapse of everything we had up at that point. No free market economics, no capitalism, no way to accumulate wealth for inheritance or just for our own savings when we're old or whatever. And the American people saw through this, and they said, we're not going to go for this. So you guys just go home and take your bags with you. Well, fast forward, this is the same plan we have. The attacks on property rights along the way has been epic. We see this Trilateral Commission got after private property in the 1973. You had with their land use of land policies that they established. Agenda 21 came along with the United Nations saying the same thing. We have to get rid of private property. We see today the attack on private property is just epic at this point. So technocracy had an agenda in the beginning. They didn't have the technology to do it, fortunately, at that time. Now they do. They've matured. Their whole strategy is now centered around, especially AI. That's the basic tool they have today. And at this point, we have to ask the question: Have their reasons and rationale had changed? Have has it been changed over the last 100 years? I say they have not changed. And I think we can conclude, if we look what's going on today versus what they said back then and the things that they said in the meantime, we can conclude it seems to be the same plan at this point. The only question is, do they have the chutzpah to pull it off? Because I think probably all the requirements are met at this point. Will they pull the trigger and actually get it done this time? This is the risk. This is kind of an existential risk to America for sure, because we can't survive without private property and everything that goes with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anybody else want to chime in on that?
Sure. I mean, I would just say that I agree with what Patrick said 100%. And it's amazing that they came up with this idea in the 1930s and actually had the foresight to basically be where we are right now, because they are truly moving forward on the exact same game plan, which the basis of it is to switch from the price and demand system, from a price-based system, supply and demand system, to an energy credit-based system, which is exactly where everything is headed. And Elon Musk is really the embodiment of trying to sell the vision of technocracy. His grandfather was the head of the Technocracy Party in Canada, but to see how clearly Musk is pushing technocracy, this was a comment that he made on X just 3 days ago. There will be universal high income, not merely basic income. Everyone will have the best medical care, food, home, transport, and everything else. Sustainable abundance. And if you read, Musk has actually talked several times and tweeted about Mars being a technocracy. He's talked about the importance of UBI. He's talked about the importance of energy credits. If you look at what X is, it is essentially the basis for the Chinese social credit system. He's building it as an everything app, which will have an identity system. It will have X payments, which my guess will be a stable coin or CBDC platform, and a social credit system all built into one. So not only are the technocrats going on the original plan, they absolutely have the technology, and Musk grew up kind of with technocracy is his blueprint.
Yeah. So interestingly enough, Josh Hadelman, who is Elon Musk's grandfather, he was the head of Technocracy Inc. in Canada from 1936 to 1941, right before they kind of shut it down. And he left that party. He was run out, and then he was part of this. It was called the Social Credit Party, and it was in Canada. That's actually what it's called, the Social Credit Party. So I absolutely, Musk has carried this on, this talk about the UBI. I think what's really important for people to understand is that it will not be a universal basic income. That's what they call it. It's going to be conditionally based. Right, social credit. A lot of people are familiar with social credit system in China, and it is conditionally based. Right, if you're a good doobie, you comply with all of their laws, their programs, their social etiquette, then you might get your tokens. And if you don't, or you'll get access to various places, you'll get rewarded. If you don't, you get demerits. And with a tokenized economy, that's much, much easier to implement and execute. So people need to understand that I think a lot of people hear UBI, and some people may think it sounds wonderful. Had actually shared with me this with Rickards, this infomercial, and the way they present it is like there's going to be all this plush money, and of course they didn't say that it would be doled out like the analogy they were using were the during that sea illness, the checks that were rolled out, that it wouldn't be like that. But I think people have an idea of UBI or some sort of a blanket kind of coverage as being very utopian, idyllic, but they don't look at the other side of it, which is that it will be conditional. It's not going to be just a free for all, and here's your allotment. It's not like an allowance, or maybe it is like an allowance. Like when you're a kid, you get an allowance, and if you're good and you get good grades and you clean your room, you may even get a bonus. And if you're not, then you're not going to get anything at all. So maybe think of it that way.
Well, and the other thing too, let me add in there. I think this is on a lot of people's minds. It's always on my mind. Is that I think this is also a battle between good and evil. And so, we think back and, they're going to sell it to us so it looks really good, And the other thing, and back to these natural asset corporations, they were trying to slide this through while you were with your family at the holidays, right? A couple years ago. So again, these people will sell you all kinds of stuff and then, they'll make it sound really good. But this is really like Marxism, right? Where they're taking away your God-given rights, your God-given strengths, your God-given abilities, right? And it's also a little bit, going back to 1930s, like Aaron said, you start to get into these things like the Kalergi plant, right? Where Codenville-Kalergi conspiracy, where this Austrian Japanese politician, right? He was the first to talk about kind of this master race thing. And I think that's kind of where these people are headed with this technocracy too, because again, somebody's it's kind of like, there can be only one, right? And these people think that they can be the one and that that they can create some sort of, I don't know, orchestrated thing with the world. It just doesn't work like that. And so again, I think these technocrats have learned through history, right? They've pushed history, they've pushed these wealth and power transfers, and I'll leave it at that. I just think that they're going to sell this to look good, like Aaron said, right? The Elon Musk tweet, and it's not, and we that's our job, is to dig underneath the surface here and really try to peel this thing back so we can see what's really going on.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think, I agree. It's definitely a battle between good and evil. I do think a lot of this, I talk a lot about the spiritual kind of side of it. And I know back then, at the time when official Technocracy Inc., they weren't very concerned with religion or spirituality. But certainly today, I think they're merging this, right? Patrick talks a lot about the three-legged stool. And I think if those who've read my Phoenix Conspiracy article, I really outlined that there. We've got all three lined up. But I do think that the spiritual component is so integral, because I call it the technological immunization of the eschaton. It's really this notion of creating a simulacra here on Earth, right? And that's very essential to this technocratic and transhuman, of course, agenda. They're trying to recreate or bring about what they think is going to be heaven on earth. I think it's going to be a dystopia, but they're doing it through. A lot of them try to convince us that we're already in a simulation. I don't believe that that's true, but they're doing that. By bringing about a simulation, it's really a simulacra. So everything is a image of reality, but it is not the real thing. It's a technological, right? The digital twins is a really great example of that. So I think something I would love to cover for people. I know all of you are pretty knowledgeable in this arena. So we can get different takes on this, but I don't know that people really understand what tokenization is. And I think tokenization is a huge part of both the incoming financial system as well as really being able to execute technocracy. Once they have a tokenized economy, they can, I forgot the acronym, but it was Acolum Labs that was supposedly a leak. And they had these letters for like the stratification of this tokenized society. I don't know if it was really a true leak or if it was a fictional story they concocted. Either way, I don't think it's relevant. They put a lot of details on a lot of names in it. So, it's very likely that it could have been disinformation. But the metaphor, I think, was very valuable. What they were really talking about is how you would have a stratified society that was tokenized, and you would have these classes where certain people would be allotted a bigger allowance and others would be on a lower scale, and that certain people would also be given more privileges and more permissions. So they may not have to comply with certain parameters in order to still have their tokens and have them roll over to the next month. I'm putting it in the hypothetical. I don't know what the actual structure is, but this is how they laid it out. And and I think it's a pretty good, model for what they'd like to foment and what they'd like to bring to fruition. So, but I don't think that people really know what tokenization is. So if anybody wants to give their insights on that, chime in.
Go for it, Aaron.
Sure. So I'm actually writing a book. I'm writing a book on this. I actually like to say it's about freedom versus technocracy. It's about free will, and the battleground is actually tokenization. And tokenization isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's kind of like AI isn't necessarily a bad thing, or, you know, things that are digital technology isn't necessarily a bad thing. It just depends on the implementation of it. But I will talk about what the implementation looks like from the perspective of a technocrat. And you can see this in terms of how CBDCs work or stablecoins work. And so how this relates to tokenization is CBDCs or stablecoins are just a digital token that represents a dollar. That's the simplest way, or whatever the currency happens to be. But in the technocratic version of this, there are some features about these tokens that are alarming. They can be centrally controlled and issued, they can be programmed, they can be tracked, and they can be censored. So this is the thing that people talk about being worried about when they look at CBDCs and stablecoins. Stablecoins can already be frozen and stopped, but they're not just stopping at tokenizing money. They literally want to tokenize every asset on Earth. They want to tokenize stocks, bonds, commodities, everything that you can imagine they want to tokenize. So in a future model where you have a social credit system, they can not only stop, for instance, you from using your money if they don't like your behavior, they can actually stop you from moving any of your assets or even potentially using your assets. I mean, imagine we're pushed forward where you can only use an electric car, and that there's a token representing that car that could actually be shut off remotely. That's essentially what they're working towards. And so this is why people should be worried about tokenization. There are implementations of tokens where they're private and they're encrypted and you have them in your own self-custody, which is why I say tokenization isn't necessarily a bad thing. But we should be very concerned because privacy tokens and things like Zano are very rare. Most of what's being pushed out right now, for instance, with stablecoins through the Genius Act or coming up the Clarity Act, are all of these centralized versions of tokens that are controlled by these third parties and managed by these third parties. So it is really the platform by which they implement technocracy. The one thing I want to add to that is they've been making changes legally over the last several decades. I've actually created a website on this. It's not ready for prime time yet, but essentially we've been signing these click wrap agreements, you know, these long agreements every time you use a service, or actually anything at this point, whether it's a bank account, a brokerage account, a gym membership. We're used to and we're trained to basically scroll to the bottom, these 30, 50-page documents, and just click accept. Well, when you actually do read these contracts, which it would be impossible to do, it would take at least an hour a day, 365 days a year, what you'll find is we've already given away contractually our privacy, our rights to ownership of our own information. And in some cases, we've even given away our economic interest in certain assets like 401ks and others in the event of a bankruptcy. So they've already laid the groundwork for technocracy legally. Tokenization just takes it to that next level by making it something that they can shift ownership and control with the click of a mouse button.
Yeah. Hey, can you make the distinction for us between payment tokens versus asset-based tokens? And what's the mechanism for switching back and forth?
Well, it depends on, there isn't necessarily a technical difference at all. It depends on how you're implementing it technically, but a token is a token from an issuance perspective. The government has different definitions now that they're trying to make for how they treat something that's a payment token. For instance, a stable coin that's used for actually buying and selling items kind of as a replacement for cash versus a token that represents a stock or a commodity. And so the main difference is legal. I mean, in terms of regulatory, but from a technical perspective, there isn't a difference. They're issued in the same way.
So a payment token, like one that's tethered to the dollar, if you will, 1-to-1, the same definition wouldn't apply for an asset-based token that would represent anything that might float in value, for instance.
Correct. And in fact, so the Genius Act covers these payment tokens or stable coins. And then there's something called the Clarity Act, which passed the House but hasn't been signed into law yet. And there are different rules and regulations. So you'll have the SEC applying all of their guidelines to any token that represents a security. And then you will have the CFTC involved with regulating tokens that represent commodities. Now, the one thing that you'll find is we are already heavily regulated. So one thing that I want to say about tokenization is that people don't realize how much financial surveillance we already have. There's this misunderstanding that somehow we actually already have freedom. Our money is already digital. The Federal Reserve uses an Oracle database. Most of our transactions are digital. The money that we use today is already programmable and censorable, not as much as it will be under this tokenization scheme. So tokenization just adds more to this. But I identified 13 different federal programs that are involved in regulating money. I mean, everything ranging from NSA bulk data collection of our financial transactions to the IRS working with your bank using AI to analyze your transactions, to the Bank Secrecy Act, the Patriot Act. The list goes on and on. We are already financially surveilled. And now they're applying all of that to digital tokens, which is going to give them more instantaneous control over all of our assets.
Yeah, I think the other thing is that as much as they may already have the capacity to surveil, and we were talking about this earlier, but I think the problem is that now they're going to convince people that they don't own anything, but they're in debt on things that they don't own, and that they'll somehow wipe that out. But what people won't recognize, or I'm hoping we can shine light on this, is that there's still equity that people can leverage. But when you tokenize, you don't have equity. They seize the assets. So even though, like, I think a good example might be land, right? If somebody owns their home, now, unless you have a land patent, you still pay taxes. So you're essentially renting it from the government, right? You're leasing your property from the government. But you still have equity that you could leverage. And that is actually what most people in this country do for small businesses. If you take away that ability to have leverage for equity, you're going to eliminate most of the small business capacity in this country, which I think would be devastating. But it's very much aligned with their plans to put everything into the big corporations, the conglomerates, the public-private partnerships with the NGOs, and it's very conducive to technocracy. So what are your thoughts on that? That's the big kind of shift that I see, because I agree with you. I think, we don't own a lot of what we think we own already. I mean, the property is just one example. Craig could probably speak to the markets, and, people can get certificates. Most people don't. So they don't own most of their stocks either. And the list goes on and on. But I think the big shift that they're trying to do with this tokenization is it's in the equity that they're going to seize.
Yeah. Well, let me add real quickly. So let's just talk about currency for a second. So really what a currency is it's really just, its ability for people to transact within a boundary, right? So, the US has a dollar, Great Britain has the British pound, the euro has the euro currency, right? That's an aggregation of a lot of different countries, one common currency, all floating separate debt. So now we start to get into currency, right? All it really is a pass through. Someone gets money, they go out, they buy a farm, they buy some groceries, they buy a car, whatever. And then that farm goes up in value. They turn around, they sell it, they convert it to dollars, and then they move it to something else. Well, then we start to get all kinds of debt, right? So we get federal government debt, we get local municipal debt, we get student debt, car debt, home debt, family household debt, all that kind of stuff. So, we look at this situation with currency and debt, right? And this kind of plays into these, how are we going to go from a world that's so awash in debt? I mean, the world it's just like almost not even imagine, how much debt there is out there in the system. And then we get into derivatives, and everybody's kind of managing these derivatives. And we hear President Trump right now talking about trying to lower the interest rate and going after the Federal Reserve and the whole Federal Reserve apparatus. We've seen this really going on for about 4 to 6 weeks, where it's just this constant attack on Jerome Powell. Then on, I'm drawing a blank with her name. But anyway, the most recent one, so we've had multiple attacks. And so what they're doing is they're really trying to go after this apparatus, the Federal Reserve, that monitors this whole global central bank thing, right? Where money comes from, kind of where it originates, how it moves around the world, and really who controls it, right? That's the real key. Now we get into things like inflation and deflation. And, what's going to make a currency ultimately change from a US dollar based world? Really the dollar is the world reserve currency of the world. Last year we saw this big thing with BRICS coming in, Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. They really tried to make a push with that and try to put commodities behind it, but it really flopped, right? And it flopped for a lot of reasons, because none of those currencies are trustworthy. Why is that? The US is the most productive country in the world, right? And so it's like the gem on the hill, right? The shining beacon on the hill. And so, again, that's what makes the dollar the world reserve currency. So I guess what I'm trying to say here is this, that, as soon as we move away from this situation where we have a currency that represents a boundary or a culture or a geographic productivity of a people, right? Then all of a sudden we tear down all the boundaries and it's a free for all, and that's what this looks like these technocrats want, right? They want to implode the system, okay? And then they get a free for all, right? Because then everything's up for grabs and it's easy for them because they already have, like Aaron said, they already have the databases in place. They're already transacting. They're already monitoring all this stuff. So I think that the thing that I want to say is we can look at these things like, again, back to that Kalergi. Read up if you can on this Kalergi guy, okay? Because he kind of spearheaded this whole European experiment in a lot of different ways. Back before World War II, tipping off Hitler, right? Power, wealth transfer. And then we get into this whole situation where, the euro has to create this common currency, but they never create a common debt. So that system's going to blow up, right? We know that there's going to be a sovereign debt crisis somewhere that's going to kick this off. Could be in Japan, could be in China, could be in Europe. And the key is, what can we do about it, right? How can we get out front of this so that we don't get caught in this situation? And Aaron and I have had a lot of conversations about this. Again, our founding fathers knew something, and it still holds true today. You got to bring it back to local, because if you let this stay at the top level, federal level, global level, whatever, it's going to unravel and it's going to be a free for all. If you can bring it back to the local level, and you can get privacy and you can actually transact and have, trustworthy transactions again with some form of currency. It doesn't matter whether it's wampum, doesn't matter whether it's tree bark, doesn't matter whether it's tokenization, doesn't matter what it is, right? It just has to be trustworthy and transactable. People have to understand that they can move their things, their effort through that currency into an asset, back out of that asset, back into their hands to do something else with it.
Yeah, so I did look it up. I found it. And I do think it's hypothetical, but what it was CSRQ, and an acronym stands for Common, Sovereign, Restricted, and Quarantined. And so the model was essentially that you'd have like the common, right? That's the masses, and they're going to be on that very conditional, UBI. Then you have the sovereign, and they have slightly more privileges. And then there was the restricted, and the restricted were the way they described it. I mean, I'm not going to mention the names they named because I do think it was a disinfo op. But the model, I think, is very much what the elites would like to have if they could have their technocratic. They think utopia, I think dystopia. But it would be restricted. So the restricted are kind of like the very high level power influence operators who've been given privileges as long as they do their task. And then you have the quarantined, which are the people who are outside of the system. Essentially, they have unlimited tokens, they have assets, they it's like the ultimate hypocrisy with people like Al Gore, who scream about the climate crisis, but he can fly all over the world in his fancy jet because he has so many carbon credits. So I just wanted to clarify that for people. But also talking about you were talking about the currency. I think that, it really doesn't matter what it is. And you were talking about how, it could be, it's about the model, not about like, the physical currency itself. But you were talking about how our founding fathers really knew something. And I think this is such an important point because I think that really, I keep going back to the Declaration of Independence. A lot of people, have lost hope in the Constitution. That's, another conversation we can have. It's certainly been trampled on extensively. However, I think that the Declaration of Independence was the first document, and I would argue really the only in history, that has codified in writing this notion. And it's a very profound ontological truth that we were endowed with inalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and from our creator. And this is really, it's rooted in a very profound philosophical concept that, encompasses what it means to be human. And I think that when people are talking about, I hear a lot of discussion around property rights as a bulwark against technocracy. I unfortunately very much disagree. Property rights, while I absolutely support people defending their property, I think property rights are absolutely important. And I'm not at all saying that people should, just let that go. However, property rights are predicated on contract law. And contract law is, it's really essentially constructivism. So it's not, and again, I'm not negating the value of contract law, but it is not the same as inalienable rights. But inalienable rights, I think, are our greatest defense against this technocratic takeover. And I think that that's something we really need to shore up and strengthen. And I think so much of our education system has done everything possible to erode people's understanding of our history and have an understanding of those philosophical underpinnings which our history was founded upon. And I do think that that was by design. Our founding fathers talked about the importance of an educated citizenry. And it wasn't because they wanted people, only the elite, to be able to vote or have a say, and to be citizens. That wasn't why. It was because it was predicated on this experiment of self-governance. But they understood that in order to self-govern, you had to understand some of these philosophical, truths. Really, you had to be rooted in, and they believed, obviously, the First Amendment is the freedom of religion, so it didn't necessarily have to subscribe to one religion, but there was a metaphysical reality that you had to have an understanding of in order to be able to self-govern in a way that was a defense against tyranny. So I think that's just a really important thing that I'm in the process of working on, drafting up some material for people to try and clarify it in more simple terms, because I know when I start talking philosophy, sometimes people gloss over, but I really think it is so incredibly important because they're using everything that we think is our defense, they're actually using against us to funnel us into the technocracy. So.
Let me just make one comment on that. I read the declaration just today, just to make sure
Great.
that I understood it. Okay.
Yes.
And I had to memorize this in grade school. I remember the whole thing, and I remember doing it, but we only memorized the first part, like the declaration.
Uh-huh.
But when you look at all of the things they're complaining about, all the things that were sticking in their craw, if you will, we see the same things happening today with these technocrats when they're stomping us in the ground. You could relabel or repurpose all of those things that I think there's at least 50 of them, and it's like, holy mackerel, this is like not modern commentary. And if somehow we could have our own great reset, not the progressives' great reset, but if we had our own great reset, we would have to go behind the Constitution, because at this point, this document has been rendered null and void. Not by us for sure, but in the way they've trampled the whole thing underfoot. At this point, our last document that we have before that was a Declaration of Independence, and this probably is a good place for us to start at this point to understand what we can do.
Yeah, and what always strikes me when I read this, I have done some speeches where I, quote from, obviously, the, part, we are endowed, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. My, how that has been lost. That's my own commentary. That whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the rights of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute a new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them they shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. jurisprudence, indeed, will dictate that governments as long established should not be changed for light and transient causes. And accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer, while evils are sufferable, than to rights themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. They go on and on. But the next line, they say, but when a long train of abuses and usurpation, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present King of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries and usurpation, all having indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over these states. And then it goes on. It's much longer, and it's where everybody should refresh themselves if they're not, familiar. If it's been a while. But what strikes me every time I read this is how many times the word usurpations is used, and I feel like that's what we're going through right now. Like as you said, Pat, I absolutely agree. It could be modern day. This is really what we're living through. And I do think it's incumbent upon us, if we do have any semblance of self-governance, but also I think as a bulwark against the technocracy, we do need to revert to this. People need to have a strong understanding of the principles upon which this was founded in order to reinforce it.
It was interesting to me that Tucson, Arizona, which is one of the most liberal cities in the country, I think, especially in Arizona, this is where Mark Kelly comes from, and it's a horrible city, in my opinion, as far as the politics is concerned. However, their city council just unanimously turned away the application for a major data center, AI data center in their city. And they said, we're not going to do this. We don't have the water. We don't have the power or whatever. And they had a unanimous vote. And it was a beautiful thing to see. If a city like that can do it under pressure from their citizens, just to think what you could do in your city if you could get everybody on board.
Yeah.
It'd be a wonderful thing.
Yeah, they're not going to give us a chance to vote. We have to take the chance to vote. We have to go and grab it. They're not going to give us a chance to vote on data centers or no data centers. And it's going to test the riparian rights. It's like the water stuff that's coming up, right? And we've been through that. I mean, you go through the Midwest and you get farmers, and there's been battles and court fights years after years of water. Well, we're not even, if we don't take this chance, we're not going to get that vote. And farmers are just going to be out of luck. There will be no water. You know what I mean? And they'll drain the aquifers. They don't care, so. But one of the things I wanted to add is we can't forget, though, that, Washington also, to pay the army, right? I mean, he did usurp a bunch of land in the Ohio Valley, right? So he marched in there, took a bunch of land. He knew it because he was a surveyor. So he knew how to access it and get front run it. And then he also took it to pay back to officers and so forth to fight against, the tyranny. So I guess keeping that in mind, I know people always trash the dollar, and I know that and I'm a huge proponent of the dollar because since the 2008 real estate crisis, the dollar's actually been in an uptrend, and people hate me for that, right? They're like, oh no, the dollar's garbage, right? It's whatever. The point is, it's been in an uptrend for 17 years, right? 17 or 18 years. If you look at it from 2008, there's no doubt about it. Now, the reason I bring this up is this, because this is, I think, one of our ways out. The dollar goes up. That's deflationary. What does deflation mean? That means that the everyday working person, their hour of effort goes further. Okay, they can buy more things. They can do more things, right? They get more for their hour. If we get inflation, that means a dollar going down. Okay, dollar goes down, we get inflation. Guess who loves that, right? The globalists, the elites, the technocrats, all them, because they have their hands on all the buttons and they can control things. They love it because it's not just one type of inflation. There's currency inflation, asset inflation, demand inflation, right? There's all these different types of inflation. And I really think that a dollar will fail, right? I'm thinking it could fail on the upside, right? And that's good for us because it takes the power, the assets, the strength out of the hands of the elites, puts it in the hand of the working class, right? As we go into this transition, I mean, the dollar will fail. I mean, Aaron can tell you, anybody who studied any fiat currency, it will fail in time, right? Ultimately, they all fail because they devalue them, they cheat, right? I mean, that's what government does, right? They cheat. And so they, you know, they make it look like it's silver, but it's not silver anymore. You know, so again, that's the upside to this, is that if the dollar can fail on the upside, okay, that puts a little bit of power and a little bit of juice, a little bit of tailwind at our back. It takes the assets out of the hands of the elites, puts the power back in the hands of us, you know, the working class, right? The workers who work every hour and they try to make that go distance. Problem is we've got, you know, this inflation, and that's what we're trying to fight against. So I just wanted to throw that stuff in there because I think hopefully that leads us. I know Pat sent out a couple notes, and I just wanted to make sure that, you know, like hopefully that directs us in the direction of some of these things that he wanted to cover. Does that make sense? Any thoughts on that, Pat? You want to respond on that?
Well, no, I like what you're saying, and you know, we have so many insurmountable issues, I think, with technocracy at this point. What the technocrats are doing to us right now, right before our eyes, the solutions are going to be hard to come by on a local basis, even. But we have to try. That's the only place we could put a firewall around our home, our community, and stuff like that. Because states won't do this. Certainly, the national government won't do it either. But your local officials, your entities, the city entities around America, they're the last word on sovereignty. Period. And that's my opinion. And if you can control that narrative and your city council, whatever, you can have a great place to live and well, for instance, in Arizona right now, we have the legal right to use gold and silver as currency. If a town in Arizona at that point said, you know what, we're going to ditch all this nonsense with stable coins or whatever, and we're going to do transaction business now with gold and silver, it could happen in a heartbeat. But will anybody do it? Will they see the light, why they need to do it? Our role at this point is to try to wake people up that these people are not playing games with us anymore. And they're dead serious about sacking the whole country. It's inconceivable to me. It boggles my mind how big of a heist this would be if somehow they can snatch it away from us when we're not looking. And there's lots of reasons that we're not looking. If they could snatch all of these assets away from us, it'll be the biggest heist in history. And I have to say, stealing land is really hard. The only way you can do it is by eminent domain. And otherwise, maybe you can steal a title or something. But otherwise, you can't steal land. It's very, very hard. But if you can tokenize the land,
Yep.
Holy mackerel, that now it's in a digital form. It's easy to steal everything at that point. And if you think that BlackRock will not be interested in getting all those tokens in their portfolio, you're smoking something wrong here with you know? And so we all these sharks running around in Washington, D.C., and like Larry Fink now just nominated to be the co-leader of the World Economic Forum. You can't get rid of these people, but on the other hand, they seem to be intent on executing this huge heist of all assets in the world. How can we prevent them from doing that? Well, I'm not sure yet. Local is important, really important for us. Yeah. I don't know how it's going to play how it will play out otherwise.
Well, local's very important, but one of the things I want to lead this to you, Aaron, if I can, like so Aaron and I were talking the other day about, you know, Bitcoin, right? You know, Bitcoin's is big, you know, I mean, we see all these firms piling in, right? They're using it to manage their treasury and their corporation. They're trying to get people to buy it. BlackRock's got wrappers on it, right? The ETF. They're trying to get everybody to go into this. Same thing's going on with private equity, right? There's a lot of stuff going on in this private equity space. And I wish I had the charts to show this, but the point is, like, you know, there's a lot of money tied up in private equity, and there's a lot of money tied up, you know, in this Bitcoin thing and in the crypto space. Okay. And Aaron can really do. He was talking about this the other day, and I asked him if he could kind of go through this, and we're talking. And I'm going to try to lead into that in the sense that the the big thing for me is this, that these, again, back to these currencies, and if we can bringing it back to the local level is for sure the key. The biggest fear I have is that well, why don't you just talk about this, Aaron, and then I'll come back in. So explain what you mean, like Bitcoin's been hijacked, okay? And we see like this Strive, okay? It's a company in Ohio, and we have this guy, Mike, I think it's Mike Cole. Anyway, it was funded by Peter Thiel and JD Vance, right? And Lonsdale, right, of Palantir. They fund this thing, and they're also funding a bank in Columbus, Ohio, right? And so it's very concerning to me, the things that are going on in Ohio. We also see these big data centers going on. There's a lot of things happening in Ohio other than Arizona, right? I think you must be in Arizona, Pat. But in Ohio, there's a lot of things happening here. And it's sort of under the whole auspice that, Ramaswamy is going to get voted in as governor, and maybe they can run cover for a lot of this stuff. So again, Aaron, if you could talk about that a little bit.
Aaron,
unless you have something, Courtney.
I'm going to interject with one thing before you run with this, Aaron. This will add to it. But two comments I wanted to make on what Pat was saying. One is when you're talking about, this, essentially they're creating the technique. It's not just here, right? The heist, this is, the AI action plan talks about making this essentially the technique for the world. That our companies are going to roll out the technocracy all over the world. So it'll be the blueprint, and it'll also be we're outsourcing all the tools for them to use. So that was the first thing I wanted to say. But also in speaking to this tokenization of the land, I had done a big post about my home county. I grew up in Bergen County, which is also actually, interestingly enough, where the Finks are from. But they have partnered up. There's a new technology. It's called Balcony. And they're the leader in blockchain-based land record management. And it is, I looked it up just to make sure I didn't get it wrong, but I do remember it. It's 370,000 property deeds that are on the chain already, which is the equivalent of $240 billion. That they are already doing. So this is already like land and homes that are already on the blockchain. And of course, BlackRock is also talking about tokenizing every single asset possible. They're talking about bonds, they're talking about funds, they're talking about real estate. So I think it is interesting that their county, I don't know if they still live there, but is kind of leading the way on this. So yeah, you take it away, Aaron. Just wanted to add that.
Well, I don't even know where to start. Actually, I have so much to comment on with this. The first thing I think I want to say is that, I think we need to be open to a variety of different solutions. I mean, the technocracy is a monolith, and I agree they're moving towards. The way I try to describe technocracy is imagine one global currency that's backed by energy credits, where the 17 Sustainable Development Goals of the UN are the elements of a social credit system that's tied to that energy credit-based currency. That's kind of how I look at it. And clearly, this is the direction that it's going in. I think that on the currency front, I mean, this is why I'm a big proponent of alternative currencies. I like privacy coins, but I also like, things like gold and silver. So I'm not for any one maximalist position where you just pick one thing. However, one area that I've been going down, and I have the site, I haven't even released it yet, but I guess I'll talk about it here today, freedomforge.io. And the whole point of this is it's basically an incubator to create solutions to the technocratic programs that are being rolled out. So if you go to freedomforge.io, I'm sure there can be a lot of problems with this site. So again, it's like alpha release, but it says they're building chains, we're forging freedom. Everything will be tokenized. The question is technocracy or freedom. Freedom Forge prototypes, incubates, and invests in non-custodial Xano-based counters. And to give you an example, there's a threats page where it's, okay, what's the threat? The threat is CBDCs and regulated stablecoins. What's the counter? Something like Freedom Dollar, which is a privacy-backed stablecoin. What is the threat? Public health tyranny. What is the counter? A global P2P healthcare marketplace where people outside of insurance, outside of the entire system, essentially a global medical tourism marketplace that's completely private. And so the whole idea here is to incubate a whole variety of projects, not just me incubate. I want to get this information out so anybody can build it, but to start explaining to people what the technocratic threat is so that maybe it stimulates them to build some of these solutions. And these solutions can be used locally, but they can also be used globally. So for instance, I think it would be helpful if farmers could have an online marketplace where they could sell their goods, not just locally, but they could sell their goods anywhere. It's a great way to kind of accelerate this. And so I just wanted to bring that up because this is one of the areas that I've been spending quite a bit of time on. And I feel a tremendous sense of urgency, by the way, because they are proceeding at warp speed on tokenization.
Yep.
Courtney, you're exactly right. I mean, with the Clarity Act, Larry Fink has been talking about this. And, if you think that a tokenized 401k or stock is going to reduce BlackRock's control or power, you're mistaken. It's going to have the same programmability as CBDCs or stable coins. As to the Bitcoin, there's it's a long story, so I won't go through all of it. I do recommend that you read the book Hijacking Bitcoin. But Bitcoin, in theory, originally started out to be something that you used as peer-to-peer cash for daily transactions. It was created to be something to stop the boom and bust cycle of fiat currencies. So you use it for day-to-day payments. It was supposed to be low fees, high transaction volume. Anyone, anywhere in the world could use Bitcoin without needing permission. That was the original vision. And most people don't understand or know that that was the original vision. It was something that was supposed to compete with Visa and MasterCard right out of the gate. And it was hobbled and intentionally hijacked between 2015 and 2017. And so now you have this model where people refer to it as digital gold. Nobody ever talks about using Bitcoin anymore for day-to-day transactions. And I like to say there was kind of a technocratic takeover of Bitcoin. They added this cap and trade system where they limited the amount of transactions that can be done to 7 transactions per second, and then increased the fee. So it's kind of like the way carbon credits work. And the people that pushed that had ties to the Bilderberg Group, had ties to traditional finance, had ties to the intelligence agencies and MIT, which had funding from Jeffrey Epstein. When you really dig into this, it's kind of a nightmare as to what's happened. So there are people out there now thinking and still saying, well, Bitcoin is freedom money. And in reality, it is now just I call it hijacked digital surveillance gold, because all of the Bitcoin transactions are on a public ledger, which means they can be tracked, and they are being tracked. There's a company called Chainalysis that maps out everyone's transactions. I've had this year 3 separate people come to me that either had a divorce or a business dispute, and they were in a situation where the counterparty hired a private investigator who's now trained in this Chainalysis. So they were able to get more transaction history through Bitcoin than they are from a bank, which typically only holds these records for 7 years. So it's this digital surveillance gold. But on top of that, the big reason people are plowing all this money into it is that they've bought this idea that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin and that it's scarce, and that's what makes it incredibly valuable. And it turns out this is also not true. And I don't want to go into spend a lot of time on this or a lot of the technical aspects of this, but the way Bitcoin works is every 10 minutes, computers around the world are solving math problems. The first computer to solve a math problem gets a reward called a block reward, and then gets all of the fees for the transactions that are added in that 10-minute block. Now, these rewards started out at 50 Bitcoin per 10 minutes, and then every 4 years it gets cut in half. The whole point of the block reward was to be an incentive for computers to secure the network until the transaction volume was enough that miners could make money just on transaction volume. So the whole purpose of Bitcoin, the economic structure, was based on a large volume of transactions and on miners making money based on transaction fees. Because it's been artificially capped at 7 transactions per second, miners make almost nothing actually mining on transaction fees. They are basically banking on the continued increase in the price of Bitcoin. It's completely speculative. So you have people spending $50, $100, $150 million building these mining facilities, using all of this electricity, speculating on whether or not they can solve a math puzzle. That's essentially what's going on now. And because of this rush to AI, the electricity costs are going to increase in the United States to such a degree that miners are not going to be able to mine competitively relative to other places in the world. So the entire premise is blown away. And because of this, once miners start going under and you have this issue with not enough computers actually trying to solve these problems, they're going to increase the supply above 21 million so that to provide extra incentives for the miners. So long story short, the scarcity 21 million argument is false. They're going to have to change it. They're going to have to increase the number of coins. And this is something that they've been talking about for years. And it's in the risk factors of BlackRock ETFs and other documents.
And the reason I wanted Aaron to talk about that is because I think they're setting the stage for an exit strategy. Okay. You see strategy with Michael Saylor, Mara Holdings, 21 Capital with this guy, Jack Mallers, right? Riot Platforms, Trump Media and Tech Group Corp, right? These guys are holding all like 15 to 20. I mean, strategy holds like 628,000 Bitcoin, right? And so the key is if they can pull people in and they're creating these, esoteric strategies behind it. Again, we talk about this great taking. What better way to get people on this technocratic platform than to take everything they have, right? So again, we talk about this great taking, some event, and we think, oh, come on, they can't do that. Well, they shut the world down for like 2 weeks to 4 weeks during COVID, maybe even longer, depending upon how you want to measure it. Again, some sort of again, I talked about this in 2019 when the repo crisis, right? It set the stage for them to rip us off, $7 trillion during COVID. And it's the same kind of thing that I think is going on now with this private equity scam. Okay. They need out. They need an exit strategy. So what better sitting there than people's 401ks, right? What better place to put Bitcoin than in people's 401ks? What better place to put it than in the corporate treasury, right? So again, I think they're setting the stage to do a big wealth and power transfer. And they're just, and 401ks are sitting ducks. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know if anybody has any thoughts on that, but that's why I wanted Aaron to talk about Bitcoin, that they hype this thing as this great thing that's going to solve all the world's problems. And here's one of the foremost experts, Aaron, on this. And he's saying that's not the case at all. And so I'm trying to read between the lines and let people know, like, you got to watch out because they're coming for it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what kind of,
okay,
go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just saying, what kind of scam this is that you actually have companies that are being formed for the purpose of raising money from other people just to buy Bitcoin. And I want to tell you how absurd this is. The whole point of Bitcoin was that it was something you had in your own custody. There were no third parties. There are no banks, no governments. It's something to use. We are now several layers removed from that concept. Most people now never touch a Bitcoin. You have now people investing in a company, and then the company buys the Bitcoin. But the company doesn't even own the Bitcoin. The company actually is using another third party like Coinbase. So you're like 3 or 4 levels removed from the actual asset itself. And my opinion is that this is an opportunity for people who want to, I used to say, say that people that were early to Bitcoin looked at central bankers with disgust. And then I realized that now they actually looked at them with envy. They want to become central bankers. They want to become the next elite. And so essentially these treasury companies are people that are trying to do just that. They're trying to get, a big piece of the pie using other people's money, which I suspect in the end, they're just going to convert Bitcoin to other assets, not hold it indefinitely. The idea that you're going to hold Bitcoin indefinitely and that somehow the entire world is going to restructure. That what's weird about it is though you even see these memes where it's a diagram. It's like a pyramid structure. It's the kind of structure that people, when they look at central banks and they look at the Rockefellers and the Rothschilds and everything else and how society's developed, this is how they're glorifying Bitcoin. They'll say things like, well, if you have, 10 whole Bitcoin, then you're going to be at the very top. You're going to be living in a citadel completely separate from the rest of society. So they're really trying to re-architect the same structure, just with them on top. There's no moral difference or ethical difference at all.
What about the system that they're erecting right now with all this regulation, the Genius Act, the big beautiful bill, the executive orders, etc.? Is this monolithic? I think I look at it as a monolith, but a monolithic financial system based on tokenization, tokens. Is this privately owned, or is it owned by the government, or what? Who's going to own it?
I think it's going to end up being owned by
Craig is cracking up.
The technocrat. It's going to be owned by the technocrats. It's going to be owned by the technocrats. But I'll tell you, it's funny when you look at this. I actually suggested that when you look at these stable coins, we're going to need to put together a book called The Creature from Epstein Island because of the way that this works. And just as one side note on this, so Howard Lutnick, who's now U.S. Commerce Secretary, who previously had no involvement in politics, in 2017 he negotiated a deal with Tether, which is the largest stablecoin on the planet. And he invested $600 million, not as equity, it was a loan, a convertible loan, in exchange for being the exclusive manager of treasuries for Tether. Now, understand this, Tether has never passed an audit, and there was no requirement that Tether be backed by treasuries. And so even though they haven't passed an audit, they've claimed that they have 100,000 Bitcoin, they have tons and tons of gold. So they've been backing these Tether, not necessarily with treasuries, but this guy comes in and says, well, here's $600 million. I want the exclusive contract to manage the treasuries. Then he gets involved in politics, gets this position as the chair of the transition committee or whatever, which is a hugely important position, actually involved in the selection of the cabinet. And he was trying to angle to become the Treasury Secretary. So this is talk about, a scam on the level of Biden's or Clinton's. And then he helped push the Genius Act. So the single biggest beneficiary of the Genius Act is Howard Lutnick's firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, which is still run by his son, because they have the exclusive contract to manage the treasuries for the largest stablecoin issuer. And now because of the law, Tether is going to be forced to back their stablecoin by only treasuries. So whatever it is that they have backing Tether, they're going to now have to convert to treasuries, and Lutnick's firm benefits. So you're going to find when you go through all of this tokenization, it's the individuals involved, that a lot of the same players, Fink and so forth, that are the beneficiaries of all of it.
Speaking of Fink, let's not forget that back in, and I'll mention this in a second too, what's on the screen, but let's not forget back in 2018, Trump made BlackRock manager of the Treasury, which was a huge conflict of interest, and very few people talked about it at all. I would have thought people would be outraged by it. The whole Federal Reserve is was a literal conspiracy on Jekyll Island, right? As you were just alluding to. And it is not federal, nor are there reserves. It's a complete sham. But you would think that people who know that would then be up in arms about this. And nobody really said, I think maybe two people that I can think of said much about it. I did a bunch of research on it back in 2018, prior to my being aware of much of anything that was going on. I was very much in the dark back then, but that gave me chills. I just thought that was really, really terrifying. But yeah, so Tether did invest in Rumble, $775 million into Rumble. And I just get a kick out of this. So people can take this information, do with it what they will. But the amount of shares that comes to was 103,333,333 shares. And that just kind of cracks me up because, they always signal with numbers. So I thought that was very interesting. But the other thing I wanted to bring up also, which I think is very relevant too, because you mentioned 2017. 2017 is actually when they did that study using humans to power, human heat for crypto mining. And, they've really downplayed this technology, saying it's not very efficient. But we've also had a lot of, some people call it predictive programming. The actual military term is operational preparation of the environment. And those who have seen any episodes of Black Mirror, right, where they're on the bike, literally powering everything. So it is kind of interesting when you start looking at things like MAHA, which RFK has said actually means MABA, Make America Biotech Accelerate. Yeah, here it is, cryptocurrency system using bodily activity. And this was the, so they have a patent on it. And this is this is the 0606 one. Yeah, that people were talking about, the Microsoft patent back in 2020, people were talking about. But even back in 2017, they were doing experiments on this. And they did have some success with it. And there have been more since then. And there is talk of how this is kind of like I don't have the evidence to prove it, but there are people who are targeted individuals who have talked about them being part of this kind of an experiment. So people can do research on that due to the platform we're on. I won't go into too much more detail on that, but the research is out there for people to look further if they're interested. But then that kind of brings you to like Web3 technology. And when you ask like who's going to own it, I mean, certainly there's the Tethers, the Lutniks, the Finks, the Brock Pierce involved, all of those kind of characters. But when you look into Web3, and I think this is a really important conversation, is it's being advertised. The marketing, their marketing is incredibly genius. They're masters of linguistics. They keep talking about how everything's going to be decentralized. Another buzzword is transparent. And certainly, as we know from Bitcoin or from any kind of blockchain, transparent is not necessarily a good thing because they keep talking about digital sovereignty. There is no such thing as transparent privacy. It's an oxymoron. You can't have both simultaneously. I'm not saying that there can't be decentralized options that are really positive and do empower the people and that do act as a bulwark against technocracy. I absolutely believe there are good, decent people who have the understanding of what we're up against, who are able to hopefully develop that kind of technology. But when they talk about decentralized, particularly when they're talking about Web3, everything becomes actually even more integrated than it is today. Because it becomes so much more interoperable. So when they talk about, like we're in the fourth industrial revolution, we keep hearing Klaus Schwab, he wrote the whole book on it. We hear this out of the World Economic Forum. We hear Yuval Noah Harari say this is when the year that things go under the skin. So all of these kind of terminology, but the fourth industrial revolution is really this is when we start to merge. It's the beginning of this integration moving into Web3. But they have a lot of the quote unquote experts, I put them in air quotes, they have said that we're actually already in Industry 5.0, which is the fifth industrial revolution. And when you look into the fifth industrial revolution, they start talking about how part of the problem with Web 2.0 is that we are siloed. And certainly that is a problem. We all recognize these problems. They're really great at pointing out problems that are accurate. I just, where we disagree and we diverge is on their solutions. I'm not so enthused by their solutions. But when they talk about how we are being siloed, they're saying that now this is going to be the solution to these silos, is everything's going to be interoperable. And the way that I think about it is like, it would almost be like taking your LinkedIn profile, how that has like, your whole resume and everything. And now that's interoperable on any platform. So you take the whole thing with you. So it is even more integrated than what we have now. So yeah, you're not necessarily in a silo, but you're definitely not achieving digital sovereignty as they keep advertising, and very much actually the opposite. And yes, it is decentralized, but it's centralized, but it becomes re-centralized because how else is it going to be transparent and interoperable? And these are huge, huge problems that I think really need to be discussed and contended with. But I think that this putting leap into the other component too is, of course, they talk about how everything's agent centered. That's really code for your digital twin. So they talk about how you will have like a digital representation of you up on the internet that will be interoperable with every portal that you go into. I mean, they're talking about this in every sector. They're even talking about it in medicine. We heard, Larry Ellison from Oracle, when he announced the Stargate project, he talked about this. He didn't use the term, I don't believe, in the public announcement. He didn't use the term digital twin, but that is what he was alluding to. So I'm very, very concerned about it because I think that Web3 is really where they have, they can really execute the full technocracy. And that's not to say there couldn't be benefits to Web3. I'm sure there are, but I'm very concerned about the control it gives them. I don't know if anybody has anything they want to say on that. People who might be more tech savvy than I am.
Well, let me just add one quick thing. Like the thing that always frustrates me with the whole medical system is HIPAA gets put in place, right? And digital records start to come in. And it's really a one-way flow, right? It all flows in one direction. They get all the data. What do we get back? We never get results like, oh, this is good for you. This is good. I mean, look at COVID, right? They did everything they could to cover everything up. So again, it's a one-way flow of information. They still can't tell us. I always laugh at this one. They still can't tell us whether red wine is good for us or not, after all
Yeah,
this time.
it's true.
So the point is, I just think it's a one-way flow, and that's what that's where they're taking us, right? Is a one-way flow of information, whether it's financial, same thing, one-way flow of information, whether it's whatever, it's just a one-way flow of information. So it
I-
looked like Pat was going to go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. No, I just want to say, add to that, because it's not entirely just a one-way flow. It's a one-way control, like in terms of power. So it's really, they have, it's a cybernetic feedback loop is what it is. So, and when you look, Patrick was reading the definition of technocracy. Well, right on that same page, they talk about how the purpose of the data collection is for surveillance, for control, and that's the only purpose of it. I'm paraphrasing, that wasn't their exact words, but that's essentially what they say.
Yeah.
And so when they're collecting all this data on us, it gives them the leverage, but it's not necessarily one way, because they are using the cybernetic feedback loops. So they're using it actually to program us without us even having an awareness that we are being programmed, that we are being, controlled, or we're being siloed, or we're being pitted against each other. And actually our very thoughts are being programmed through the data collection, through the feedback loops, because they're able to then target us using this kind of cognitive, epistemological, and psychological warfare landscape, which is even more concerning than just them collecting the data. But they are collecting it, and then they're beta testing us with it. So
Yeah. I'd like to ask another question off topic. Well, it's on topic, but off that
Sure.
topic. What do you think? We talked about Howard Lutnick, Secretary of Commerce. He was on national TV multiple times, January, maybe December, January, and even February, talking about the digitalization of all of our national assets, like the land that we have, the 558 or 550 million acres of land. And he looked into this, into the off the camera, like looking into space, saying basically, ooh, if you could just imagine all these assets in the land and the minerals and the gold and all the oil, why, if we could, Elon and me, if we could just get our hands on all that assets, if we could just make 0.25%, we'd have $1 trillion. He said this incessantly, laying claim, didn't have at that point, but laying claim to the land assets that are owned by the United States of America. This is a huge asset for sure, because the government, they don't take it as an asset at this point. But if Lutnick's, especially what you said about his relationship with Tether, is Lutnick planning literally to digitize the assets of the United States like this? And what would that mean to the American people at that point? Will our national assets just fly out the window, or could they be usable? Not by us, I would think, but to somebody. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I'll defer. I'll just say this really quickly. The one thing that I'm really concerned about is because this is such a sleight of hand, and we saw this with the natural asset companies that they tried to push through, is that people may think they own their land, but they don't have any controlling rights over it. And I could see them, like you were saying, land is very hard to steal, but if you tokenize it, then they may own the assets. And if they own the assets, they could have the controlling rights to the land that you live on. And we see this already. I mean, they were not successful. We were able to push back against the SEC, partnering with the New York Stock Exchange and putting natural asset companies into effect here in this country on the New York Stock Exchange. But there are lots of other places in the world where they already have these natural asset companies, so we can learn a lesson from them. And we also have in this country, we have these conservation easements. I was very involved in my own state trying to push back against them. My senator, who unfortunately passed away pretty recently, said that it was the reason that he got kicked out was because I kept screaming about these conservation easements. But through these conservation easements, for those who aren't familiar with the concept, essentially you could own your land, but they incentivize you through these tax credits. And so you could have a land trust that you inherited. I'm just going to give a hypothetical. There are many ways that this can be structured, by the way, but this is just one example. You could have a land trust that you inherited from, let's say, your great-grandparent, and they had a conservation easement on that land. You may not be aware of it, but that conservation easement, they can have through that conservation easement what are called ecosystem management services, and which give them controlling rights. So let's say your land is very oil rich and you want to drill on your land for either your own uses or for commercial uses. They can decide that that is not good for the environment and therefore you don't have the rights to, but then they could, and they could then profit off of your land. So they could have, imagine that, like imagine this is your home, you live there, and they decide you cannot have access to it. You can't drill on your own land, or you can't mine on your own land, or farm on your own land even. And then they decide that they want to, because they are better stewards of the environment than, of course, you are of your own land. And so under the guise of, stewardship of the planet, they're going to seize control and and then profit as a result on your land. So I just imagine that, like, that's a pretty hard thing to really conceive, that you'd live on this land, have no control over it, and that somebody else could then go and drill on your land and then be profiting off of it as well.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's something that's possible. I mean, you could do anything with tokenization. You could make it so that you only have the right to live there, and you could divide it up any of a number of different ways.
Well, they've
That's one
already
of the,
done that. That's already been done. These conservation easements, they already have those rights, and in many places. So, but yeah.
So yeah, this just makes it that much easier. But yeah, what do I think Lutnick is trying to do? Yeah, I mean, I think this is how we end up with a global system, because you're going to have nations competing to do this. And so once again, it's not going to be the citizens who benefit from this. It's going to be the people that are involved as intermediaries who are involved in this tokenization process that end up with all of the power and all of the control. So just as Lutnick's firm, Cantor Fitzgerald, is now managing these treasuries, when you tokenize these assets, they're going to need to be held in custody somewhere. So who is going to be the custodian of these digital tokens? And I suspect highly that, based on what I've seen, that you could see Cantor Fitzgerald and others and BlackRock are going to, that's their next play, is they're going to become the custodians of these digital tokens, which include national assets and land that are going to be tokenized and ultimately traded. And it's going to be a global phenomenon. So you can see it happening. I do want to say, on a technical matter, to the Web3 comment.
Yeah.
This is why I'm exclusively for privacy coins and things that are outside of this system, because Web3 it's very transparent, but it's not as decentralized as people think. The most popular platform for Web3 is Ethereum. And I actually did a podcast interview with a guy named Steven Neryoff, who was there at the founding of Ethereum. He was essentially the lawyer who worked on structuring all of the documents. And he was in a position where he knew a little bit too much. For instance, he knew that the largest kind of owner of Ethereum at the very outset was a Chinese company. And there was a whole backstory. I mean, he ended up being, the DOJ manufactured an extortion case against him and raided his house and everything. He's now suing the government for $9 billion. But the point is that Ethereum is not like Bitcoin in that you have these computers all over the world trying to solve these math problems. It uses a proof of stake model that's very much oligarchical in nature. So it's a very small number of people that control which transactions get added to the network in Ethereum. And so it's not even decentralized. And it does have all of the problems that you mentioned with respect to transparency and then identity systems. This is one of the problems with something like Ethereum, which is that, imagine one way of looking at Ethereum is it's an app store for Web 3.0. Well, imagine, because it's transparent, now everybody in the world can see what apps you've downloaded. Well, to give you a sense of where the government stand on this, a guy named Roman Storm created a company called Tornado Cash, and the purpose of this was to try to add privacy to that so that you couldn't see what was going on. And the federal government went after him. Even though he had lawyers and everybody telling him what he was doing was not against the law, he was just found guilty of conspiracy to commit money laundering or something. He's going to end up spending 5 years in prison. But the government has been going after people that work on privacy-based solutions. So there's a big move for these completely transparent systems that aren't even decentralized.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what I keep talking about. That decentralized is a big buzzword. And a couple of key examples are like Balaji Srinivasan when he talks about the network state in his book. And I put this in many of my articles. I put the screenshots, but people can go and look it up online. He has a free copy online. But he has a whole section, and it's called Towards a Re-Centralized Center. So I encourage people to remember H.G. Wells talked about decentralization. He described it as like the ganglia of information institutions. So, like the academic institutions, the, various media institutions, that they would be the conduit that would create the world brain. So this whole noosphere concept comes from decentralization. It then gets re-centralized. So I absolutely agree with you. It's not nearly as decentralized as people think it is, but it is the buzzword. And I think in part they're using that buzzword because it's very appealing to people who are, freedom-minded, certainly a lot of libertarians, which I think they're very much trying to appeal to currently. So I think it's really just language games and it's marketing. I don't think it's a decentralized actually at all. It might be in the surface level, but that is then being funneled into a very centralized locus. And so, yeah, I think that's very concerning.
Hey, Greg, do you have any thoughts about Ludnick having access to all our land in the United States?
Well, yeah, and I think, tying into the globalization part of it, because that's what I do, is look around the world at a lot of different things. And I think, I agree with your question because I remember that exact moment too. I refer to that as like a barb, it doesn't draw much blood, but it hurts a lot. And when you see those kind of things, you're like, whoa, like what is he talking about there? And then Aaron, we've talked about this, Lutnick's tight ties with Jeffrey Epstein, lived 2 doors next to him. Obviously he bought his property for less than $10 in New York. That's worth tens of millions, tied in with, passed through Les Wexner, through Columbus, through, some trust deal that they did back to Max Fisher, this thing goes on and on and on and on, right? It's been going for a long time. And I think, what's Lutnick doing in that crowd? What's he doing living next to Epstein? Back to the Bitcoin and Epstein. And again, all we can do is begin to understand what's going on and draw conclusions. But yeah, I think it's this global thing that's going on because you can go back to Hermitage Capital. I don't know if that rings a bell with anyone, but this guy Crowder, Bill Crowder, it probably starts to register, that name. But, look, Europe's in trouble, right? They fell down this, whether they fell down or they went down this path of the global climate change thing, going into wind and solar. They spent a lot of money on it and it's not working out for them. The UK, across Europe, everything. They're ready to blow up. Okay, that system's not going to last much longer. Back to the currency, back to one currency, multiple debts. It's going to blow up, right? Just like the peg to the Swiss franc to the euro blew up in 2015 or whatever it was. It's going to blow up. And the reason I say all this is that they've wanted access to Russia for a long time. All the resources, all the goods, all the land, everything up there. And they tried to go through Hermitage Capital, right? They tried to go through Yeltsin. They've tried to go multiple different ways. And Putin's put up a pretty darn good fight trying to protect Russia. Now, I'm not here not trying to defend all this, but I think look, the world is very hungry we have a ton of debt. The world's very hungry for new technology. BlackRock owns this company. I think it's GICS, right? They're ready for war. I mean, they bought this company a year and a half ago, and that's what it does. It rebuilds things. So they're ready to destroy stuff so that they're ready to move in and rebuild it, right? The whole banker war, the whole same concept. So again, yeah, I think that we're headed to world war. I think it's to get access to land. You know, I think Lutnick, again, is he the financier? Is he playing part of the role in there? Is that whole thing? I mean, is he communicating to, whoever it is out there, the neocons or whoever it is that he's communicating to? I don't know, Pat, but I felt the same way when I saw that same clip. And it makes me think like, this is just I mean, I could go on for an hour on this. The point is, I think they are after resources, land, water, energy, rare earth metals, rare earth magnets. I mean, they're after it all because it all feeds into the technocracy and their whole thing.
Well, and
I
also,
just want to add one.
I was going to say, let's not forget how much they're going to need to power all those data centers. But yeah, go on.
Of course,
Well,
5 gigawatts.
I just looked this up. I'm going to add that Cantor Fitzgerald owns something called the Newmark Group, which handles property management, valuation, and leasing for institutional investors. It includes large-scale land deals and energy, commodities, and urban development.
There you go, Pat.
And in addition to that,
geez.
there are discussions in policy circles linking Cantor to Project 2025, which was a project that talked about privatizing federal lands and creating a $200 trillion sovereign wealth fund. So, I mean, I think definitively, yeah, he's right in the middle of it.
And don't light me up because again, they play games with valuation. Again, if you're gonna take people's land and you're gonna give them a bunch of tokens instead, what do you need? You need valuation companies to revalue the whole thing and say, oh, look what we gave you. You got all these tokens, right? Look what they did during COVID, right? They stole a bunch of money from us in the future, right? Then they give it back, in these little subsidies. So we go out and spend to keep the economy going, right? And they know that it's all going to go to Walmart and Target and boats. People, burns a hole in people's pockets. They want a boat, they want a car, something to get outside. Money funnels back to all these people and we end up with nothing, right? More debt, more everything else. And they take the $7 trillion. And that's it. Yeah. That's the way that goes round and round and round.
Wow. Incredible.
Yeah, so good find there, Aaron.
Yeah, no, that is a scary find. Yeah, I think they want complete control of that's what the natural asset companies were. And they thought they were going to make upwards of like $500 quadrillion. So I certainly don't think they're just going to let that go because that's just like an inconceivable amount of money. So yeah, I'm sure they're just rebranding and figuring out how they can get complete control and, access to that. So I know we wanted to take some questions. So if anybody has questions, put a Q : just so we can scroll through and find them. And then, if anybody has any other topics they want to bring up before we go to questions, let's do that.
I think on Twitter, is it Stop Technocracy is a hashtag?
Hashtag is Stop Technocracy.
Okay.
Yes. So please share, help get this information out because I think very few people really are talking about technocracy, even in, the quote unquote dissonant circles, whatever the names of these circles these days, but the alternative sphere, it's really not something that is very popular to talk about. It's probably not super favorable to many algorithms. A lot of the people in church are very much vying for this. So definitely help us by sharing this information because we need to brainstorm. I certainly think we're very far from coming up with all the solutions, but the more minds that we can get, the more critical mass we can get to push back. That's the hope, or at least slow down their plans, as I like to say. Buy us more time. I think that's that would be good. All right. So shall I start going through questions, or do we have any other topics we want to go through now, or?
Well, let's get some questions.
All right.
We probably should
Okay.
end this about maybe 2 hours or so.
Sure.
It'd be good to get somebody's questions in there.
Sure. Okay. Well, I want to thank Harry Ludwig, Super Chat. So thank you so much for that. And then we've got from I Am. His question is, people are solution hungry. It is easy to identify and talk about the issues of the day. We need solution talk. What are the top 3 things we need to do as individuals? So I'll start with this, and I agree. I think people want things that are really concrete and tangible. I do not claim to have all the answers or even many answers, honestly. I think the problems are very, very complex, and it has taken us a long time to get here. And they are really masterminds. But I think there are things that we had addressed it a little bit earlier on. I think that very local. I know a lot of people have given up on politics, but when people think politics, oftentimes they're thinking the federal level. They get really excited every 4 years. I'm not all that hopeful at that level. I'm also not that hopeful at the state. That does not mean I want to deter people who have the inclination, the resources, the proclivity to take action. Take action wherever you feel called to do so. Not my place to tell you that. However, I have been pretty active in my state, and from what I can see, there is tremendous corruption. So it is very demoralizing and frustrating. But I think there are things we can do really locally. City councils, people can take action even just in like they're not just even a school district, but their own school. So one of the, tangible examples I keep saying is there is no reason, at least I have not been convinced by anybody for any reason why there needs to be AI in schools under the age of 6th grade. They're just, to me, I think that is something people, and you can start with just your school, or even if you're a homeschool parent, fight for some sort of a bill that allows you to keep that out of because now with the vouchers and the whole school choice, that's a whole nother can of worm. But school choice is a huge part of technocracy. This is all about the tech ed, the data mining the children to create the global citizen, to make them cogs in a machine in the technocracy. So it is actually quite relevant, but it's a whole can of worms, so I won't go open that up. But that's like a very simple example. I think Aaron brought up, and so did Craig, about the farmers. I mean, farmers can say, like, they can push back. We want no climate smart commodity projects in this district or, on our farm. Start with your farm. There are things people can do. Those are just two really, simple examples from things that I'm familiar with, because those are topics I've been very involved in at the state level. And I'm realizing that if people took action locally on those, that would be great. If anybody else has their solutions,
Yeah,
they
can
want
I
to chime
jump in?
please
Can
do.
I throw one in there?
Yep.
Can I throw in something actionable?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So here's the thing. So I use harmonics in markets. So I take these harmonic structures. We don't get them all the time, but we get these harmonic structures, right? Markets have these vibrational patterns. What does it mean? 8 billion people on planet Earth are connected through supply and demand of different things. So let's just take our stock market, right? We have this harmonic structure in the stock market. It's responded very well to this harmonic structure. We always check it. We don't just throw numbers out there without checking them. Got to the halfway harmonic, spent a lot of time there. For any of you who watch our show or whatever, And anyway, we've got a target in the S&P 500 at 6,574, okay, on the September futures contract. So essentially another a little over another percent on the upside. I've been putting together a list of things that, would constitute a top, a short-term top, long-term top, medium-term top, or something in the stock market. And here's the thing that you're going to want to look for, right, is they always sell, again, markets love to climb a wall of worry. All right. They sell you fear all the time. And what happens? Markets go up, they go up, they go up. So if you start sensing them selling hope, and they say, oh, just hang in there, it's going to come back. It always comes back, right? If you see that extended for an extended period of time, that's a red flag that this market's not going up, right? If they start selling hope, again, flip the thing upside down, sell you worry all the time, oh, this is going to happen, whatever, right? All these fear things. And the market's done nothing. This market is so overextended. And again, if we think what's going to happen with the AI? What's going to happen there's so many things we could go down the list. I keep making this long list of different things that could happen that could cause a market top. People are very complacent right now. Even Rick Reeder, okay, the fixed income guy at BlackRock, says the market's incredibly complacent. Everybody thinks it's going to go higher because Trump's in charge and everything else. There's something very specific. Watch a 65.74, and without getting in all the details, if you start hearing them selling hope, that's probably a red flag. It tops in, and watch out, right? So do with that what you will. You can get short markets, right? Again, this whole financial industry is a scam, right? They want you on the mouse wheel, pull your money in, put you in the system, get you working, BlackRock, State Street, Vanguard. They use all this money against you. They come back, ESG, whatever their next scam is, right? Whatever it is, they use it against you. The key is what you need to do is look for other options out there. Can you get short a market? Could you go market neutral, right? There's different strategies. Could you use option strategies? There's so many different things that they just don't teach people. And it's so sad to watch, right? There's so many options that they use. They know really, really well, but yet they don't ever share it with you. So that's the thing. 65.74, S&P 500, September futures. If they start selling you hope, look out.
Yeah. Pat and Aaron, do you have anything you want to add for solutions?
I think I've covered my shtick at this point. Basically, you have to think global and act local. That's period. I can't say any more
Yeah,
about it at this point.
I agree. Yeah, Aaron, do you want to chime in with anything on that?
Yeah, I would just say we need to reclaim our free will, and some of the most valuable things that I've found. Stop using fiat currency. So I stopped using a personal bank account in 2019. This is key because the more tied in and compliant we are with their system, the easier it's going to be for them to roll this out. And if you can, do whatever you can to get outside of the healthcare system as it is, because that's usually a trap and a justification for people to work in jobs that they don't like for health insurance and everything else. This is going to be a big part of how they try to trap you in the system. And then look for food that's outside of public health recommendations. I mean, I always say, but boycott public health, boycott mainstream media, and if you can, get your kids out of government schools. Those are some just tangible actual things that you can do yourself that don't even require voting or external systems.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, start with your family, start with your daily life. All right, let's get to some of the next questions. All right, where are we? Okay, we've got the senior scientist. He said, how much of politics do you think is real versus part of the Hegelian dialectic? In other words, does our vote even count? A friend of mine ran against unknown trans with 0 views, and he lost by a landslide. Well, so I spent a lot of time talking about the Hegelian dialectic. I'm in the middle of a book actually on the Hegelian dialectic. I talk also about our president. I guess we can argue whether he was the first president, but on record, the first president, George Washington, warned us against the two-party system, and he said that it would be used as a loophole for foreign entanglements and domestic infiltration, of our enemies. So I think we very much see that they very much play that against each other. However, I'm also seeing a movement. I did write an article on this. It was called The Technological Age of Aquarius, Third Way Dream or Digital Dystopia. Spoiler alert, it's a digital dystopia. But I talk about there is this movement using third way politics. And I won't go too much detail. You can read the article. But for those who aren't familiar, this comes out of the Fabian socialists. It's a concept of radical center. And this is so it's not the center. This is what they kind of push these two extremes to their furthest end, so that people think, oh my goodness, I want nothing to do with these two crazies. I want to be, in the middle with the moderate, rational people, sane people. But it's a radical center, and he explicitly says, Anthony Giddens, in his book on Third Way, he who is a Fabian socialist, he explicitly says that it is always left of center, and that it has to be for their social and emancipatory goals. And what I am seeing is a lot of the independent movement. There's actually something called an Operation Phoenix, which is an operation to flood Congress in 2026 with quote unquote independents. I think most of them are technocrats. That's really what they're trying to do. And they're doing it under the guise of moving beyond the two-party system. Beyond the two-party duopoly, the two-party illusion, whatever title you want to give it. So they're pointing out the problem, as somebody had said before. It's easy to identify the problem, and that's typically how they hook you with these dialectics. They hook you by pointing out the problems, and then they've got that solution, which is really a synthesis. It's synthetic, it's syncretic. And so while I recognize that there is very much, they play dialectical games, I encourage people to be careful about the synthetic and syncretic solutions that they offer. Because just because they're pointing out the problem and the problem may be valid, that doesn't mean the solution they're offering is a better solution. Because right now what they're doing is using the awareness and the frustration that people have with these dialectical games to usher people into the technocracy. At least that's what it looks like, in my opinion. But I do think that people still have a lot of power locally, and I really encourage people to get involved. We saw that with a few years ago when all the students were on Zoom and the parents were horrified. A lot of people got involved. The mama bears came out and they got involved in their school board, and they made a big difference. So I encourage people, especially locally, not to give up. There is power locally. And Patrick just brought up an example. So yes, they will try and circumvent, but I still think people should wield their power wherever they can politically. So anybody else want to chime in on that? Sorry if mine was long-winded. Anybody have thoughts on that, or do you want to move on to the next question?
I would just say politics is manufactured. I mean,
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to vote your way out. Not much more. I could say a lot about it, but
Fair
it's not
enough.
worth the time.
Yeah.
Just quickly,
let me
how can
say,
you trust tokenization if the system isn't trustworthy, right? If you can't trust the government, you can't trust that there's actually going to be justice and laws enforced. How can you trust tokenization? That's all I would throw in there.
yeah, exactly. We have to understand that the power of AI at this point is able to bend public opinion
Yes.
towards one candidate or another. This is so subtle. This is the science of social engineering that technocrats talked about even in the 1930s. But now you have AI. And when AI can take a group of people, maybe a small group of people even, and cause them to change their mind on any given issue, basically that means elections are going to be over. That is free will elections. We're going to be over. So, you know, you need to be very critical in your thinking when you consider all the stuff that AI can do to manipulate your opinion. Don't play the game. If you can, don't play the game.
So I
Well, the other
so
thing
agree
too-
with that, and I've outlined some of their strategies for this AI technology in voting in my Shadow Side of Digital Democracy article. So these are some things to really watch out for. I still think locally there are things people can do, and a lot of times locally doesn't even require voting, honestly. But
It doesn't.
so when you hear things like, just to give some buzzwords for people to push back wherever they're trying to execute these. Things like liquid democracy, that's talking about AI. Quadratic voting, that's AI. Conviction voting, that's AI. Synergistic democracy, they've got a whole bunch of names for these things. And they're putting it under the banner. The way they're marketing it is that this is going to give people more access. But as Pat just outlined, this really means that AI has full control. And didn't we hear Yuval Noah Harari say this, that voting is a thing of the past, free will is a thing of the past. So all right. Yes. So next question.
One more. Can I add one quick thing to that? I just saw today that they're gonna set up AI so that kids who need special tutoring or something like that, they'll have their own special tutor by AI. Tell me that isn't ripe for disaster.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
That's why I'm saying, like, people can get into just their school and say there's no AI under 6th grade. Start with that. Like, we are not allowing that monster in.
Yeah.
I think that's
Wow.
yeah. Or homeschool, but even homeschooling, they're trying to capture the homeschoolers, so people are going to need to push back there too. Okay, so Harry Ludwig says, Aaron, when can we expect your book? I do.
The very good. That's a very good question. I've been working on it about halfway through, and it keeps on getting longer and more extended out. So hopefully by the end of the year.
We know all about that.
Yeah.
Look forward to it, though.
Yes, we
I
do.
understand. Okay, so next question is, apart from China, which country is most advanced with regard to technocracy? So I'm not an expert, but I know there are several. Estonia is actually, surprisingly enough, they're kind of a model. A lot of the technocratic experiments are being done there. Taiwan, it has they've got like AI hospitals, they've got AI cities. So Taiwan is definitely. I've heard from our friend Jakob Nordengard that Sweden is quite far ahead on this technocracy, and I'm sure I'm leaving out a whole bunch of others. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts
Yeah.
on that.
Nope, I don't. But we're exporting this technocracy to the world
Yes.
from the United States at this point. That's one of the third pillar or column in the AI plan
Action
document
plan.
that recently came out. Yeah, action plan. That the third part of that was all about exporting the whole stack, if you will, of AI.
Yeah.
That means the hardware, the software,
console
operating
that they talked
system,
about.
all everything, lock, stock, and barrel to all our allies around the world. And this speaks to me about building empire. This is building an empire, and the other countries will not see this as necessarily as an empire building, but that's exactly what'll come out of it.
Yep, the technate, right? And alongside with this AI action plan is all this noise about acquiring Greenland and Canada, right? Which is exactly the map of the technate. So yes, it does look like that's what they're doing. Does anybody else want to add to that or move on to the next questions?
Well, it's not hard to do with Starlink, right? When you have Starlink, it's not hard to sort of put the world as your target, right? I mean, God, how many of you guys have seen that video, right? Where it starts off with a couple satellites, and then, you know, it goes through evolution. Pretty soon the whole world's just surrounded with satellites. I mean,
Yeah.
kind of hard to hide.
Yeah.
Well, and didn't
You know, if
oh, sorry, go on. Yeah.
well, so if every fiber link went out on planet Earth, all the copper, the fiber, all that stuff that runs the internet right now, all the switches, theoretically, Starlink could mimic that whole thing from space. Just think about that. In other words, Elon Musk has created an alternative source or infrastructure for the internet that has nothing to do with what we have on terra firma.
Yeah, and didn't Trump also partner with Elon and SpaceX for Star Shield?
Mhm.
So that's going to be like it's under military defense, but theoretically under that, I mean, that's even more covert. So the
I'm
access.
sure that'll be transparent. I'm sure that'll be transparent.
Oh yeah, yeah, they're always super transparent. We know everything DARPA's ever done. Yeah, no comment. All right. So, any comments on post-labor economics as AI automation destroy more jobs faster than new ones are created? I think that's their plan, and that's largely what the fifth industrial revolution is all about. There, didn't Elon just tweet too about how the AI is going to start hiring humans? He did. He did like the other day. I'll find it if anybody else wants to chime in while I'm looking for it.
Yeah, well, let me take a positive spin on that first, in the
Okay.
sense that, you know, at one point, you know, we had problems just picking up the manure in the streets in New York or London or whatever, right? And then all of a sudden comes a combustion engine, and you didn't even realize what jobs it would create. You know, we didn't even realize there'd be gas
Sure.
station attendants. And then all of a sudden, you know, now all of a sudden we're like, uh-oh, what are we going to do if we don't have gas station attendants? And then it's like, okay, what are we going to do if we don't have bank tellers with all these ATM machines, right? So again, the AI, again, you know, the technology by itself is not a bad thing. And it's, you know, it's just part of this path we go down. I mean, at some point, maybe it drives us all off the cliff. I don't know. Maybe this is that moment in time. But the thing is, you know, maybe it's going to take away 50,000 jobs, right? But maybe it adds 70,000 jobs, and we can't even fathom what those jobs really are yet, because we can't look into the future and see that. So again, it's not all negative. It's just, again, are we the people in control of it, right? Is it decentralized? Is it fragmented? Do we do the rules even matter for us? Or is this really that moment in time where we lose all control if we're not careful? Aaron seems to think Trump, he's like, what, USA, what'd you say, Aaron? You said it best with like, USA 1.0, like it's over, right? I mean, don't even think you can save it, you know? And I that was hard for me to swallow, but you know, I think he's right. And I think if we think we can go back and just kind of take a step back, I think that's really dangerous. I think we have to think like they do. We have to reinvent the new system. So again, not all negative, but can obviously be very negative.
Well, yeah, I mean, optimists can do great things. So we can definitely use them. But I agree. It's about who's going to be controlling it. And I think really if they're in charge, they want, you know, the robots to be running the show and controlling us. That's much of what they've been talking. And that's part of why they keep saying we need the UBI, because we're not going to have enough jobs for humans. And also when they talk about the fifth industrial revolution, you know how the fourth industrial revolution, they keep saying it's all about the gig economy. However, the gig economy in the fifth industrial revolution is really going to be replaced by robots. So people like, you know, the servers and, you know, a lot of the gig workers are going to be robots. So I agree with you. There are benefits, and there's going to be a whole industry of AI. So that will open up new jobs, and there is a place there's opportunity there for sure. But I think, yeah, we have to be very careful about how that's navigated. So.
Well, I mean, and there are going to be massive productivity increases, and it, on the one hand, and it may create substantial abundance. I mean, this is part of the debate about this. I mean,
Yep.
arguably, will people need to work? But the battleground then becomes, who controls the AI and who makes these decisions. And this is why this is the most important thing. And no one's talking about free will. When you look at the people that are pushing these big AI models and pushing these systems, in fact, the battle on AI now, which this is largely fabricated in my opinion, but the race that is between China and the United States for AGI.
Yep.
And so essentially the contest is who's going to create AI that can run things and basically make high level decisions. That's what the race is all about, which that's a fundamentally scary thought. And that actually plays into the regulation of AI itself. It didn't end up passing. It was part of the one big beautiful bill where they were going to basically give a liability shield to AI companies, at least at the state level. That didn't pass, but nevertheless, it's coming, and they're going to do it in this guise of national security, and we have to beat China. And so this should be the discussion. The discussion should be how are we going to decide these things, and what are the first principles? And no one's talking about that. It's just technocrats.
Yeah, there's actually, I did a short video on this. There's they're in the process of creating a global constitution. And this is really terrifying. It is a participatory framework for AGI, a global constitution. I may have gotten some of those words backwards, but that's essentially what it is. I have it in my video, so if people are curious, I'll link it. But it's what they're talking about in that is exactly this. They're talking about how they think that AGI will create sentience, and that we need to parent the AGI to create benevolent AGI. So when you talk about free will being in jeopardy, I think there's a huge stake when we're talking about, they use the term co-evolve with the AGI. They also talk about, because of course they're all in on the Gaia religion, and so they talk about how we may need to become subordinate to the AI because they will be better stewards of the planet, and that they may have better ethics than humans because of their information processing capacity, and that will make them better stewards of the planet. And so they're going to be controlling the ethics, right? And that some of the people involved in this are people like Ben Goertzel, who's the founder of SingularityNet, who's behind Hanson Robotics with Sophia, and some of the others are like members of the Club of Rome, but they're working on this currently. And so it is very concerning, because imagine if we have to become subordinate to AGI because they are better stewards of the planet, theoretically. So question. Day mentioned how we have given up our rights by not reading the huge agreements and contracts, by checking and marking I agree. Should making rescission of contracts become important across the U.S.?
Won't happen. Well, go ahead.
I'm advocating for people building parallel systems. My point is, in this site that I'm building will actually take the contracts, analyze it, give you a score, and show you how many of your rights you've given away in these various categories. We need to move to a different system, and I'll elaborate industry by industry what the laws are and how they were deliberately designed to extract and take away our rights, particularly in healthcare. I mean, I would argue we've already given up probably 95% of our rights in healthcare. And to give you one quick example, this isn't even a click wrap agreement. When you take a medication, you are subject to the terms and conditions of the package insert. You never even signed it. Well, go look at a package insert. You literally have to unfold the thing, and the whole thing is fine print, and you're subject to it. So the more you dig into this, the more you realize the system is structurally flawed, because the laws are actually designed to protect the incumbent players, not to protect people from dealing with each other on a one-to-one basis with integrity.
Yeah. Wow.
When you bring that up, I know somebody had brought this up, so I'll just mention it now. Somebody had asked about the Internet of Nanobio things, and this is, of course, tied to the Internet of Everything, and this is also tied in with Project Stargate. So when you talk about these click wrap agreements, especially in the healthcare industry, this becomes increasingly relevant. I don't want to go into too much detail on those topics, just because of the platforms that we're on. But there's a lot of information. I posted a lot of it. I've done several shows on it as well. But it's all there for people to see. It sounds like crazy conspiracy theory stuff. It sounds dystopian science fiction. It's not. This is very much the infrastructure they're building. But when you talk about these click wrap agreements, it gives them so much power to exert complete control through these modalities. And these modalities would mean complete control. I mean, we're talking about remote control interface types of situations, which are very, very dystopian. So something does need to be done about those agreements where people can, and there's no way that people can read all of them. I mean, Aaron's talked about this extensively. We spend all day, every day trying to read them. And even if people who could read them, if they had the time, most people don't have the ability to read them. They're written in legalese, which a lot of people aren't versed in. And that's done by design, I think. So.
How do we do the parallel system, Aaron? Any thoughts on that? Like, how do we go about that? Like, what would we do to start? Like, how would we start a parallel system?
So again, this is one of the things that I'm at freedomforge.io. So you can, I mean, think about this. We used to have handshake deals where people dealt in integrity essentially with natural law. I think these laws basically got diminished human integrity because now everybody starts out with this adversarial situation where it's like, oh, how can I get, more over? But you can use some technology where, for instance, you can use something like escrow agreements where, two people can engage and trade without even knowing each other. And you put money in, both parties put money in to complete the transaction as a way of being able to not even involve contracts or not even require trust. And then there are all kinds of alternatives. I think there's a whole, area for a marketplace of solutions for handling contractual disputes that should be explored, because the system that we have is completely the opposite of what it was intended to be. As you mentioned earlier,
Zano? Can Zano handle? Can the backbone of Zano handle something like that?
Zano has escrow agreements built in, so it is a platform that allows people to engage in peer-to-peer exchanges with escrow with no third party. So that's a fundamental component of it. Tying in other legal solutions, we need to figure that out. That's something. But I think once people see how bad the current laws are not protecting anyone, they're actually doing the reverse.
Yeah,
that's what
they are.
I've been shocked to see.
They're very much doing the reverse, and I'm very concerned because smart contracts, I think, will exacerbate that problem. So I don't think the solution is moving into the smart contracts. I think that there needs to be, if it is peer-to-peer contractual agreements, they need to be outside of the smart contract, because once you have a smart contract, there's no negotiation. I mean, it's really hard in our legal system to negotiate even human to human. So especially if somebody has a really good lawyer, but once you get smart contracts involved, there's no negotiation. So.
By the way, I would like to hear from some of our listeners in the chat stream. Do they want us to do another roundtable? Do you think? I mean, it's not up to us to decide this, but what do you think of all you audience out there? Do you think we should start this over, made another month or something? You want to have the discussion continued or not? So
chime in the chat. Let us know if you'd like to see this again. And we've got a yes already. Yeah, if we've got another yes, and I guess we've got another please. Yes, please. Thumbs up.
While those are coming in, can you guys say how much? I feel like we've hardly, at least from my perspective, I've hardly scratched the surface. I mean, there's so much stuff we can get into.
I know.
Today's I think it's more just like trying to scratch the surface. I mean, do you guys feel the same way? Like we just barely scratch the surface on this whole topic?
Absolutely. I think we really just kind of opened the conversation. We're getting a lot of the audience saying, yes, please, for sure. So from the audience who they're saying soon too. So are you thinking would a monthly sound good to you? Or let us know. Yeah, it sounds like we've got a lot of support for that.
Yeah.
So, okay. Yeah, I agree. I feel like there's so much more. We've all kind of between all of you, there's so much we could dive into. So I'll go through some more of the questions. Let's yes, there's lots of support for another one, and it does look like they would like a monthly. Some people say every 2 weeks. That might be a bit much, but monthly.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've got support.
Let me just add a second question, second part to the question.
Okay.
Do you think that 2 hours would be enough to conduct a roundtable like this, or should it be shorter or longer?
Yeah, let us know your thoughts on that. We're getting a lot of 2 weeks. I think we might do a month. But yeah,
It'd
what
be
do monthly? Yeah,
yeah.
what are people thinking in terms of the time? Just to let us know, like, is this, do you like 2 hours? Would you like it to be longer, shorter? What feels good to you? Yeah, so monthly is great. Every day
Yeah.
would be good, someone said. Daily?
Well, I'll tell you what, anybody can follow along with me on
Yes,
worldviewtube.com, where
yes,
I have a show twice a week on technocracy in particular. That's
yes.
technocracy news and trends. I think it's at 4 o'clock Pacific time, I think 6 Central. It's a
Great.
30-minute show, and you can follow along there with news and trends and stuff I'm looking at on technocracy. So maybe that will help a little bit.
Great. And I know Aaron has a show he's starting to do twice a week. And Craig also does a daily financial show. And there is some overlap. And then, I have my show, so which usually 6 days a week, but we're slowing down a little bit right now with so many other projects. So we're
Yeah.
getting a lot of people saying they'd like it to be more than 2 hours. Some say four.
Yeah.
Four might be a bit
Oh
much.
my gosh.
But
Oh
we are
no.
saying 2 hours or more seems to be the consensus. So
Yeah, okay.
okay,
By the way, the only tangible solution that I can offer people at this point is my new technocracy brochure that we just created. I'm printing, I think over, I think have 20,000 or 18,000 of these coming. They're folded, like trifold like that, printed on nice color paper, glossy, etc. We're selling these on our website store, technocracy.news, for $25. It starts at $25 for 25 of these and goes down from there. This is something you can leave on a table, like in a restaurant, have a robot, serving the food. And Elon Musk says on the front of this will be normal in a few years. And at the bottom it says, you wanted convenience. Instead, you got replaced. So this is a great explainer uh, flyer to hand to people.
and it's
There's no,
analog.
it's analog. It's right. I'm so sick of the internet. I'm sick of emails. I'm sick of all the websites that have to go to find the news and stuff. Well, we're not going to get newspapers delivered anymore. That's for sure. But there's something inside of me that wants the analog to return, honestly. So
Yes,
maybe this will be a sign for people to take me up on this and get some of these brochures and take them with you everywhere you go.
absolutely, and that's available on Technocracy News, so people can go find that on Patrick's site. We have that link below as well. So yes, all right. So we'll get back to some more questions. All right, we got, what do we have here? Any comments on hijacking Bitcoin by Roger Ver? I'm guessing this was targeted at Aaron. He's kind of very versed on this.
Well, definitely read the book. I mean, I've been advocating for Roger. If you're not aware, Roger is facing 109 years in prison for manufactured tax fraud charges coming out of the Biden administration. It's part of Biden's executive order 14067, which authorized a CBDC and a crackdown on crypto. So but the lawfare is ongoing, and he needs our support. So I recommend you go to freerogernow.org and sign the open letter. There are almost 100,000 people that have signed it. But I do think in part it's the hijacking Bitcoin book. He was actually arrested in Spain. He's not even a U.S. citizen 3 weeks after he published this book. And I've been around the country talking about CBDCs, and also I always talk about hijacking Bitcoin. And almost no one has heard about this book or heard about the hijacking of Bitcoin. I guarantee you people do not want the information that's in there getting out, and it's meticulously documented. In fact, in the time that it's been released, no one's refuted any of the factual information in there. It's incredibly well researched. He documents how it was hijacked, who was involved. He provides the evidence of it, the emails, the links. It's not just Roger ranting or saying, this is my opinion. The evidence that he's provided is from the players that were directly involved at the time. So I recommend you get the book, read it, and share the word with others, because a lot of people are being sent down the wrong path with Bitcoin.
Absolutely. All right, we've got a question. BlackRock is buying up public utilities. How do we, the people, fight this? If BlackRock succeeds, our utilities will skyrocket. Yes, this is very, very true. How do we combat that? Anybody want to chime in on that?
Well,
I made the prediction several weeks ago that there will be a time in the future, maybe 2026, where people will receive utility bills that exceed their rent or house payment. This is very serious, very serious. This has already started, and it won't get any better, I'm afraid, unless people can like take control or push, for instance, the state regulator that controls utilities. We have the Corporation Commission in Arizona. It's only 6 people, but they have to approve everything that happens relative to energy. They're doing a horrible job, in my opinion. They couldn't be any worse for Arizona, because they've basically sold us down the river for all of these data centers that have been constructed around the Phoenix area, especially. So yeah, this is very, very serious trouble right now with energy.
Very much so. Yeah. Okay, so we do have I will get to some more questions. I wanted to acknowledge the super chat. We have a super chat from Harry. Thank you so much. And it says that you can open the add a membership gifting. Yeah, he says to hit the like button. Yes, that helps us with the algorithm for sure. So thank you. And he also says that you can add membership gifting option. I'm not sure if I do that on my end. I'm very ironically not super savvy with this, because this is my 6th channel. So I have not, this is new that I've been able to do this at all.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, we've got Polymathing super chat. Thank you. And thank you for the roundtable, brave knights. Yes, we are the knights fighting for freedom and fighting for free will. And then we've got Harry also says support the channel, and that I have a book coming out. This is true. Yes, I have a couple. I don't know if Patrick wants to talk about one, and then the other one is on delay. I'm really hoping fall, so September, October. We're looking, yeah. So, but thank you. I will let people know for sure. All right, so we'll get back to more questions. Did the USA lose our Constitution? I thought that was our protection. So how can they land grab and take our information and our money? Thank you. So I don't think that I think it's been trampled on quite a bit. And unfortunately, I do think that if they succeed with this technocracy stuff, I mean, the Constitution is not really going to be a defense. Unfortunately, which is why we were talking about the founding principles of the the Declaration of Independence. I think that is really, really important. We do need to reinforce that. I'm not really one to advocate for revolutions, but it explicitly states that we should be able to. I mean, and it's in our First Amendment, a redress of grievances. So I think that we should start doing that. Unfortunately, most people don't speak up. They don't exercise their constitutional rights. They don't exercise their inalienable rights. They don't exercise their free will. And we need more people doing that. So I don't know if anybody, I could speak for a very long time on this topic, so I'm going to just leave it at that for now. But if anybody else wants to chime in, go for it.
Yeah, I mean, I've just adopted a don't ask for permission or forgiveness model, and just start building alternatives, because they're not following the Constitution. I mean, even look at something like money. It's interesting that we're going to now have digital money, these stable coins, which are completely regulated by Congress and with audits by the Federal Reserve, and yet our own Treasury Department didn't even put notes on $4.7 trillion worth of spending, or even have a process for rejecting spending. So the interesting thing about these systems as they're implemented, they seem to only apply to the people and not to the government itself.
Yep. Yeah, unfortunately, that is really where we're at. But a part of it is because a lot of people, most of us, I think it's partly our fault. People have not exercised self-governance. Self-governance doesn't mean throw your hands up and, walk away. And that, I think that is largely how we've gotten here, is that people have not. And I think while a lot of as we've already gone through, the federal and the state level, it's very difficult, but I think there is a lot people still can do locally, and I think it's incumbent upon people to do whatever they can locally. So, um, all right. So yeah. So other than that, I think we just have some great comments. People seem to really enjoyed it. Great roundtable. It was fantastic. What else do we have? Thank you all. Where Yeah, lots of support. So thank you everybody who contributed their questions. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for everybody who contributed support. Really grateful in any way that you can support. As I said, I'm on my 6th channel. The 6th one's the charm. It's double 3, right? So they say 3rd time's the charm. So 6 must be double that. So greatly appreciate it. And I'll turn over to the panel if they have anything that they want to close out with. Yeah, please do. And of course, everybody plug where you can find all of their great work individually, because they're individually all doing incredible, really just brilliant things. So please support them all. So
Yeah, so one quick thing here on the BlackRock, and then I'll wrap that up. Is the beauty of, again, technology is our friend in some ways, and they have these exchange traded funds, ETFs. There's a lot of ETFs that are trying to compete with BlackRock out there. They're thematic ETFs. There's a list of about 15 of them out there. So ideally what they are, they're kind of like storm chasers. An idea comes up like small nuclear reactors, and then there's the ETF or there's something else. So again, if people get behind this, there's the infrastructures behind to start making ETFs for what people want. Okay, so it's all there. We just have to push. And so again, get your money out of BlackRock, right? Number one, look, you say, oh, it doesn't matter. Well, it does. Remember what happened to GameStop, right? People do have power. The problem is we just never storm the castle. You know what I mean? And so this is a peaceful way to storm the castle. Just say, we're getting our money out of BlackRock. We're getting it out of there. If you still want to stay in the public markets, you can find these exchange traded funds that compete with BlackRock, right? They're as hungry as we are to see BlackRock go away or get diminished, just as much as we are. So again, that's who we want to partner with. There are people like that. So again, exchange traded funds out there. There's VanEck, there's Global X, there's tons of them. So anyway, so with that, you can find me at Real World HD on X. Post there on the markets, and also you can find little videos there. So that's it for me. Thanks everyone. I appreciate you being here.
thank you. Aaron, you want to go next?
Yeah, I just want to say thank you for having me, and thank you, Patrick, Craig. It was fantastic. This is really important, and I'm glad that this is happening. You can find me at daylightfreedom.org, and you can find me on X at Aaron R. Day. And the last thing I'd want to say is I highly recommend Patrick's Technocracy Bootcamp. I just actually went through that. So if you want to get a firm understanding of what this is all about, I really do personally recommend you check that out. It's worth the time.
Absolutely. Yes.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that endorsement for sure. There have been so many people that have taken this boot camp. I thought when I first did it that nobody would come. I didn't have a clue, but I did it anyway. And it's turned out to be very popular because people need to have a deep understanding in a short period of time. So I kind of modeled it after a 25-hour curriculum. Some people can do it in 15 or 20 or 10 even. But the idea is it's all in one place, and you can take it at your own leisure, and you can just go step by step through the whole course. After that, there's so many other resources on technocracy.news that could fill in more gaps for you. But let me just say in closing, two things probably. Number one, if you give up hope for the future, you're lost at this point. You have to have hope for mankind somehow to recover from this onslaught that's against us. We did this we did this symposium with some other people from around the world called Omnivore last fall, and we stressed how this attack is being issued against us in every conceivable human domain. Doesn't matter whether it's health or finance or economics, it doesn't matter. It seems like there's a full court press right now to destroy humanists, to destroy humanity. That is what it means to be human. This is a battle for not just a battle for the physical things, but it's the battle for our soul in the end of it. And if these people somehow can get a hold of our soul in a way that we lose hope, that would be the last time you see freedom at that point. So we have to maintain hope going forward and look for solutions. It's not all lost. Look, we got rid of technocracy in the 30s and 40s. They threw it out on its ear. We can do it again. It's gonna take creative people to get engaged, like what Aaron's doing for sure. And how many more people are there in the world that have a brain and they want to do something? Well, talk to them, spread the word around, let people know what you think. Maybe you like it all. I don't know. I don't think you will, but you tell people what you think. Ask them questions. What do they think? Don't preach to them necessarily, but just engage with people to have a decent conversation and just see what if something lights them up. Maybe you won't, but who knows? So, this is the only hope at this point. It's your mind, and if you don't guard your mind from all the propaganda and everything going on, and commit to straight up thinking, you won't do very well in the future. I hope that's not anybody that's on this thread right now, for sure. You've already demonstrated that you're critical thinkers, I think. But this is the future of our nation, our children. I'm closer being checked out than the other people in this our roundtable, but we all have kids, grandkids. This is the world that we're handing them at this point. This is not a good thing. So we have an opportunity to really make a difference. I do think I'm an optimist on the power of the American people and the American ingenuity. So I say to all of you who have ingenuity, get with the program, would you please?
Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that. I don't know if the one for October 4th, is that public to mention, or
Say again?
Patrick, October 4th, do you want to mention it, or?
Yeah, it would be good.
Okay.
We're having another symposium on October 4, and it's going to be relative to the digital takeover of the world, essentially. The scholars that will be with me include Dr. Dan Brody from Japan, Dr. David Hughes, thank you, from England, and Jacob Nordengard from Sweden. We're on the same page. We've been discussing what we're going to talk about. It'll be a coordinated set of presentations that we give. and it'll probably last about 4 or 5 hours. This is going to be a meaty symposium. So if you're up for that, you know, go to my website and look up, I think it's the brain, no, excuse me, digital, I think is our keyword. I'll have it on the homepage soon. But you can sign up, check out the RSVP form at the, you know, on our website, and we'll send you information about when, you know, where you can see it, et cetera.
Awesome. Yeah, very much looking forward to that. Well, I can't thank you all enough. Yeah, so it's on the screen for those who are watching, the digital
Yeah.
attack on humanity, the live stream October 4th, and it starts at 9 a.m. Eastern. So it's going to be a symposium presented on study group on technology and power. So yeah, definitely check that out if you're interested. I think it's going to be incredible. The really brilliant speeches. I'm looking forward to it. And I did want to address, because somebody had asked about the biodigital convergence stuff. There is a document. You can find it on the White House archives.gov. And this is going all the way back to 2002. And it's called Converging Technologies for Improving Human Performance, Nanotechnology, Biotechnology, Information Technology, and Cognitive Science. And then, of course, we have Obama's Precision Medicine Initiative, which RFK is very much reviving currently. So I just wanted to point to those two sources. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail on it right now, but those are really great resources on it for those who may have questions or be a little bit skeptical of what that is all about. But yeah, thank you all so much. And thank you everybody for joining us in the chat. Based on the response, it looks like we will be doing this again, possibly monthly. And thank you for all the feedback, all the questions, and all the support. I really, really appreciate it. And thank you to my incredible roundtable panelists, my fellow knights with their shining swords. And what Pat said about humanity is absolutely correct. You know, I had mentioned it earlier, but they talk about humanity 2.0. And when they say it, they really mean it. So we really need to be the knights who are preserving humanity 1.0. Because humanity 2.0 looks very dystopian, at least in my opinion. So, well,
Indeed.
all right. Well, thank you all so much for joining and for watching and for listening. The replay will be up and it will be going out to the other channel. I did see somebody in the chat who had said that they wanted to put it up on band.video. You can go ahead if you're capable of ripping it. Please do. Yeah, we want this information to get out far and wide. So, and for whoever, you know, can use their ingenuity to get into this proverbial fight, please do. So, thank you.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thank you.